وما برياض من جمال وخضرة وطيب هواء وهي في الرتبة القصوى، فهل هي تسلي عن عقيق وخندق ووحد وسلع أو واريس وما أروى، وطاب مقامي بعد ذاك بمكة، خلا لي حطيم والمقام لنا أقوى، حلالي سجود عند بابك خاشعا أسائل ربا جل شانا لنا عفوا، قبلوا يمنى الحق جل جلاله يحو سبل الهاشم المصطفى حوا، لزمزم للميزاب للحجر للصفا، وفى لي أوقاتي بجهري والنجوى، أردد ذكر الله لا شيء غيره أمامي وخلفي مثل من حقق المحوى، وأسأله سترا وعفوا وتوبة وهديا وتوفيقا وصونا عن الأسوى، ونيل قبول منه والفوز والرضا ورؤيته وسط الجنان كما أهوى، وإن الذي قد رد طه لمكة سيرجع إبراهيم للمصطفى المأوى، على أحمد المختار من عند ربه صلاة وتسليم يطيب بها المثوى، عليه مع الآل الكرام وصحبه صلاة وتسليم يفيض بها الجدوى. سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره وأمجاده العظيم، اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you, Brother Ihsan?
Alhamdulillah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I'm turning up my volume as well. So yes, can you say something again?
Bismillah. Can you hear me?
Bismillah. Yes, I mean, yes.
Alhamdulillah.
How is your family?
Everybody's okay, alhamdulillah. They're actually preparing to leave out of town right as we speak. So
Okay, alhamdulillah. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I am out of town. I'm at Jamila's and Hood's in Dallas. And so, yeah, so perfect timing, alhamdulillah. We should probably go ahead and get started. And I'm going to open up with Al-Fatiha. And then I'm going to, inshallah, ask if you will then open us up in a special dua, inshallah.
inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Yes, so Imam Ihsan, if you could open us up in a brief dua, inshallah.
Fatiha is the best. It is the best opener. I'll just join in with Salatul Fatiha. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad al-Fatih lima ughliq wal khatim lima sabaq ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. بسم الله.
Alhamdulillah. Yes. So I will say that I do not have, the formal bio for Imam Ihsan, but I do want to welcome all of our guests, our beloved guests who are here with us in the moment, in this very luminous setting, and with our luminous guests, Imam Ihsan Muhammad, who is definitely one of the companions and students of Shaykh Hassan radiallahu an. And I want to go ahead and start by saying that when I was humbled by the request to facilitate this interview with Imam Ihsan, I said, okay, well, let me, even though you have been, maybe without you even knowing it, you've been one of my main teachers in the Tariqa since I joined about 3 years ago, since you are the Imam of the Zawiya in Atlanta. And even before I joined, I would go there and just join in the dhikr with you all. And so I did reach out to your beloved mother and sister who know you best, along with your wife, Asha, and just got a few tidbits from them. And so I would like to just start off by just hearing from you about, if you could tell us about your early childhood and your early Islamic and Quranic education with your parents. And so, as long as I've known you, you've been in Atlanta, but then I know that that's not your original origin. So if you could just tell us a little bit, give us a little bit about your background and your early childhood. Yes, and your family, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, bil jamali wal jalal wa salatu wa salam ala mahid billah. Alhamdulillah. Like you said, I'm not technically, from the A. I wouldn't fall into the category of Grady baby, as they say. I was born in Tuskegee, Alabama. And from there, we did a small stint in Colorado very early on, but we came really to settle in Tallahassee, Florida. And there was a nice, community there of very diverse community of Muslims. I would say that the community that we were a part of was the first, Sunni community there. Even at that time, there was no, community that was mostly like foreign. They had some of the Muslims from different countries that were, most of them, they were students at FSU, Florida State University. So at that time, they hadn't had like their own, or created their own space to worship. It was mostly just the MSA getting together at different times. There was also a big community under Imam Wardi Muhammad there. And we were early on, like just actively getting together with them, like for Eid and for events and stuff like that. So, we were kind of always tied together from the beginning. Um, in terms of Quran, my parents were my first teachers. And there was a brother. Another thing about Tallahassee, we've always had this long-standing like connection with Detroit. It's pretty weird, you know. Like we're all down in Florida, and there's a connection between us and Detroit. Like a lot of people from Detroit, you know, move back and forth between Florida. Some actually stuck and stayed. And my first like formal teacher outside of my mother and my father was a brother named Yusuf Abdul Hakim. A lot of people, Detroit people, know him as Aki Yusuf. Um, and what's funny is that a lot of these people from Detroit that we had super early contact with, they already knew about Shaykh Hassan, but I never remember them actually mentioning him. It was something that, at least as a child, it never came up to my memory. You know, the adults probably, you know, remember them speaking of him because the Detroit, they had already come in contact with Sheikh by then, but at that time, we knew nothing of Shaykh Hassan. So yeah, and then later on, you know, from Tallahassee, we kind of moved around a little bit and ended up in Atlanta.
Alhamdulillah, yes. A shout out to the Detroit community. Their presence in the Tariqa, it's felt very strongly in the United States. And alhamdulillah, thank you for sharing that. And I knew that there was something to do with Alabama, but I didn't know about the Tallahassee and all that. And yes, from a actual Grady baby, I knew that there was a little bit more that set you apart from the Atlanta community. But we are so happy to have you here in Atlanta as a mainstay now. I know that when I reached out to Karima, your sister, she talked about the fact that your love for Shaykh Hassan started because of, or was a natural progression from your father's love of Shaykh Hassan. And so can you speak to that? Because actually, I would say one of the earliest memories that I have of the Tariqa and the Tijani community in Atlanta was your father. And I only knew him as Sheikh. And so I was like, do I know his father's first name? I was like, he was just Sheikh, and the owner of the Muslim accessories store, variety store of Tijara. So if you could tell me more about that relationship with your father and how that kind of brought you closer to Shaykh Hassan.
MashaAllah. So I was actually blessed to be with my father when he first laid eyes on Shaykh Hassan or really heard about Shaykh Hassan, right? And it wasn't in person. It was via a photo. So at that time, Imam Bilal Fareed, rahimahullah, who was originally from New York, you know, he came and moved down to Atlanta. He got married down here, and he was doing business with my father and several other members of the community. And one day after Salat, maybe like on the weekend, because nobody was busy, Imam Bilal Fareed invited us to his house, which is right around the corner in the West End from Oglethorpe Street Masjid, Oglethorpe Avenue Masjid, which is defunct now. So, you know, we walked to his house and he served us some, you know, some sandwiches and stuff for lunch. And, you know, they got to talking, and Imam Bilal Fareed, he had been to Senegal early. Maybe after Sister Karima and, well, actually, I believe Imam Saeed was the first that traveled that we know of. So after Imam Saeed, rahimahullah, traveled there, and Sister Karima, Brother Bilal Fareed was like one of the first people that went himself. And he was somewhat of a professional photographer. So, I mean, he took pictures of everything. I mean, his his 2 photo albums from him making that one trip, I mean, they were so exhaustive. It was like, you know, just seeing so much of it before, you know, we ever got a chance to go. It was funny because by that time, my father and them had started talking about us going to Africa. And, you know, we had mixed images of Africa. Tell you the truth, I mean, mine was somewhere in between jungle, somewhere in between Sahara, right? And I had this dream that I thought was real wacky at the time, where I saw this sand road, like going, in between some rickety looking houses and buildings, and it like dead ended somewhere. And I used to be thinking, like, how does a sand road dead end? Like, I used to have like, it was real funny to me. And when I saw those pictures, basically I saw the road, but it was paved by that time. The main road going from Cadillac into Medina and dead in that Sheikh Ibrahim house. But I saw that in the picture and it had pavement on it. So anyway, we were looking at these pictures and they were talking adult talk. So I was just kind of on the side flipping through it. And then I got bored and just kind of leaned back. And I remember them talking, getting around and talking about Sheikh Ibrahim and Shaykh Hassan's father and Shaykh Hassan. So he said, I have some pictures of them. So I kind of, got a little interested. So I kind of leaned in, and my father, he turned one page and showed my father a picture of Sheikh Ibrahim. And my father, the first thing that came out of his mouth, he was like, well, this is the first time I'm ever seen a picture of Sheikh Ibrahim or really hearing about his name. And he was like, wow, he looks like a real Sheikh. Right? And then he turned the page and he said, this is Tijani Cisse. This is, his main Khalifa, and so on and so forth. We started, talking about, I can't remember everything. Like I said, I was young. So I was just looking at the picture like, wow, like, and I remember like, man, he looks like hardcore. That was in my mind, like, and my father was like, mashallah. And then the last picture that he had in the album, on the last page, he turned, and it was a big picture of Shaykh Hassan. He was like full, big 8x11 pictures they had taken, real nice pictures. The pictures that Sheikh Ibrahim and Tijani Tariqa, they were like pictures of pictures that he took. But this one was a live picture that he took of Shaykh Hassan. And my father, the first thing came out, I was like, wow, he looks too young to be a sheikh. And Imam Bilal, he was like, but Allah give whatever he want to anybody he want. And my father was like, mashallah. From that moment right there, that's when he decided, like, for sure that he was gonna take me to Senegal. Like he was done when he saw. I don't know what kind of connection it was in his mind, but from that conversation and him seeing those pictures, he was ready to pull the trigger on that without even meeting him in person. So that was his first introduction to Shaykh Hassan.
MashaAllah. Yes. And for someone who never had the pleasure of meeting Shaykh Hassan or seeing him in person, I don't recall seeing him in person. His pictures had that impact on me. I have pictures of Shaykh Hassan in my home. And, just seeing pictures on other people's, I guess like photo cover pictures or even on Zoom, it just really inspires me. So I definitely can relate to that. And I'm very curious to know what, Sheikh, your father saw in that picture that sealed the deal for him to send you to Medina Bay, or to know that you would be safe there. And that would be a life transforming experience for you. Can you tell us more about why your family decided to send you to Senegal? So I know that he was inspired. Your father had been probably studying the legacy and the lives of Sheikh Ibrahim and his Khalifa and Shaykh Hassan. But I think that there had to be, of course, something more behind that to make that big move to send you there. So, and was that, and maybe it had something to do with you, like, did you have a lot to do with wanting to, go to Medina Bay, or was this driven by your parents? Can you share that with us?
Strictly by parents, more so my father at the time. Just flat out me, I was diametrically, horizontally, vertically opposed to going to Africa. And that was just to travel. I didn't even have in my mind like to go and study. I was like, right? There were several other people who, in my peer group, their thinking was different. Brother Bilal, one, Suleiman Abdullah and Muhammad Abdullah, they were all, their parents, also told them like, we want to send you out to Senegal, and they were geeked. They were excited. They were like, man, one of them said, I can't remember who it was exactly. One of them said, man, Ihsan, I wish I could take your place. And I just in my mind, I was like, I wish you could too. So I could say, but yeah, it wasn't on the horizon of my mind or my desire to go at all. So, there were certain things, there were certain factors. So, I mean, the main factor was that our parents, alhamdulillah, they were looking to create this environment where we could be in and not be separate from society and the neighborhood and the people around us, but where we could have a solid foundation of Islam that we would still be connected to whenever we did have to kind of leave out of that environment to interact with the larger community around us, that mostly being of non-Muslims and the influences that come with that. So they were always keen on setting up schools and trying to do programming with us to create this environment. In Tallahassee, we had at the time Imam Ahmed Abdul Ali was the Imam. And, we had a school there at the Masjid, community school. And Aki Yusuf were the main teachers, then Sister Salama, both of whom, Sister Salama, Sister Najma, all three of whom were from Detroit. They were the main teachers, and, some other community members interchanged, assisting teaching as well. My mom sometime. I believe Sister Akiba, the Imam's wife, also taught sometimes. Imam Abdul Kareem, Sayyad Rahimahullah, he also was one of the main teachers. And, so we had that in the beginning. When my father transitioned and moved to Atlanta, they were keen on really establishing that there in their community and going further, doing business with each other and so on and so forth. And they kind of soon found out that even with a school set up and people moving into the neighborhood physically, setting up community life, that there were certain elements that were very pervasive at the time that they didn't feel like they could protect us from. So, around that time, 1986, 1987, is really when the crack epidemic, especially in big cities like Atlanta, I didn't really see that in Tallahassee. I didn't know what drugs were. Drugs to me was like the funny smell I used to smell when I walked by the Jamaican student house near FAMU. That was the extent of it. I never knew anything, about crack cocaine and that stuff. But that epidemic had already hit Atlanta, and then it started to spill out of what we know to be, what they call the more disenfranchised communities, like, Ashby Street, and it started to spill out. It started to affect the AU Center area and areas all around, started to spill out to the West End. And, the violence that came with that trade in drugs was starting to spread. And they saw it, as a threat. So, they were like, look, we have to get these guys out of here. We want them to have this Islamic education. We want them to have this environment where when they walk around the neighborhood, they see other Muslims and, they can still interact with, non-Muslim party, there's no threat of them being affected by that, the influences that come from their environment. But they were opposed to sending us to Arab country. And I used to always remember Bilal's father, Brother Ahmed Abdullah, Rahimahullah, and my father, and several other brothers used to come in the shop in Tijara. And, they would come in for business and they would come in to talk, just like a barbershop. The people who knew, they would just walk right through the front and go come to the back and sit down and join whatever lively discussion they were having. And a lot of times, they would be talking about this because it was a big topic for them. But we got these kids, we can't keep them here. We see some of the kids already being pulled into the street. And, a lot of the brothers were from New York. some people from Detroit, they're like, look, we didn't leave these big cities to come here just to have the same thing happen to the children. So we got to get them out of here. My father and Brother Ahmed, they were always resolute. Like, you can't send them just to any Arab country to study because they're going to lose their identity. They were solid on that. My Abu used to always, refer to several ayats for his thing. He was like, look, we got to send them to somebody who resembled them. If you look at the Quran, Allah always, he say, wa ila Madyana akhahum Shu'ayban, wa ila Adan akhahum Hudan. Allah said, into, this group of people, we sent their brother so-and-so. To this group of people, we sent their brother so-and-so. And even though Islam is universal for everybody, the Prophet Allah sent him to his people, Quraysh first. He didn't send them to like the Rome first, or so that was my father's position. Like, we have to send them somewhere where they'll be able to identify and they won't lose themselves when they come back here, because they also had an example, a few examples of that where early on, those first students that went to study under the Salafi people in Medina Munawwara in their university, when they came back, they were like, they couldn't identify with their people no more at all. So, and the people couldn't identify with them. So it's like the scholarship that they gained, it didn't benefit anybody when they got back. So they were still kind of, they were on the fence. They didn't know where to go. And then suddenly Allah, he started sending people. Imam Bilal Farid from New York, Imam Bilal, the other Imam Bilal, who was actually the Imam of our community. I get his last name confused. If Sidi Abdul Malik was on, he had corrected me when Sheikh Maya was last here. He was like, no, his name was not Bilal bin Banu. His name was something else. And so we have a bunch of Bilals in the community. So I as a young person, I get them confused sometimes. I wish Brother Abdul Malik was on, that he could jump on and just straighten that out for us.
Mashallah. Okay. Yeah. Yes, I didn't mean to interrupt if you were. No,
so,
yes.
Yeah, so with them, the influx of people coming from New York and other places that already had come in contact with Shaykh Hassan, even Suleiman's father, Brother Abdullah, I remember he had come in contact with Shaykh Hassan, but it was like, they kept that kind of close to the vest. It wasn't something that they talked a lot about. Like, yeah, this great Sheikh. They kept it close to the vest. It wasn't something they talked about. And a matter of fact, in hindsight, when I got to Senegal, it was really Brother Abdullah, Suleiman's father, that I kind of had my first brush with Tariqa with, because we used to make zikr there, but it was like we just used to, get together, and there was some Naqshbandi people there, there was some Shazali people in Atlanta, and we get together. We didn't have no Tariqa. We just the adults there, they were like they split from the other community because they said, look, we want to make zikr in our free time, and the other community was like, no, we're not with that. We don't understand that. It wasn't something they understood. So that's why the whole Overthrow Avenue March was created. And on weekends, we would get together with those different turuk, and we would, they would do their zikr, and they would share their zikr stuff with us, and we would do it. And I remember at the end, Brother Abdullah would close it with this dua that I never heard of, and it stuck in my mind because I never heard like a cadence like that. And it was Salatul Fatih. And I remember as a kid, like, Nasir al-Haqq bil-Haqq, and I was like, whoa, like, what's that? It would like punch me in my chest when he would say it like that. And I was like, what is that? And when I went to Senegal and I heard, I finally went to the masjid and heard him making wazif, and I'm hearing him saying it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's what Brother Abdullah was saying all the time at the end. And we weren't making wazif at that time, that I would, first heard from him. But anyway, so not to get lost, but so they were all at that state. They wanted us to go somewhere and study and be in a complete Muslim environment. They wanted to get us away from, the whole crack cocaine epidemic and what was going on with that. People were jumping in, selling drugs, making money. They were flashy. There was a lot of violence. People were getting shot. Atlanta, it was kind of new to Atlanta. That, especially the violence part, that wasn't something that Atlanta was used to, and I would get that from them. So we were all kind of experiencing it at the same time, even though I just got here to Atlanta. So when my father was introduced to Shaykh Hassan by Imam Bilal Farid at that time, that was it for him. He in that same space, he knew where we were going and who, he would put us in contact with, and who he would put us under. So basically, that was why they, took us and put us in Shaykh Hassan's hand.
Oh, mashallah, what a beautiful story. And it makes a lot of sense the way that you shared that, because it seems like you already had a very vibrant, rich, genuine Islamic community around you, with the teachers and people that had some associations with, the Tariqa in Medina Bay. But sometimes you can't, even with all of that, right? You still can't kind of overcome the negative influences of the environment, right? And what was happening in the South or in Atlanta, just in the United States at that time, and especially communities of color, like that we were a part of, right? And this idea that they knew, it seems like your father already had a vision for what he wanted, and he might have been waiting for Allah to kind of direct him, exactly to where exactly he needed to send you all to kind of fulfill that vision. And the identity piece, absolutely, when you come from Atlanta or from the South and the strong, civil rights culture in the South, and just, that pride in your African-American identity, then your family had to find a way to bring you into a new Islamic environment that would still cultivate that identity, right? And celebrate that identity at the same time. So alhamdulillah that you all were exposed to what was happening in Medina Bay and the shuyukh there. So I'm gonna go ahead.
I was gonna say it in hindsight, it's just something that stands out, that even though some people would describe, my father in the group, that were around the group that he was in as, definitely Pan-African, leaning toward the militant side for sure. But with all of that, and, and they're, making sure that we, were taught about our people, our history and all of that, they didn't have a clue about how African Islam was. They had no clue how completely immersed Africa was in Islam. They didn't know. So it was a shock, a super shock to them. It was a very pleasant shock because, and I've since found some writings from my father. I will share if we have time, but, a lot of them indicate, like, he would write about this kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but kind of a sense of like a pang in his heart, because it was like he would write and kind of hint like he loved Islam, right? And speak of this love of Islam and of the brotherhood that Islam teach, but kind of a similar notion where Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah, or Malcolm X, he would say about the Christians, he'd say, yeah, Christianity, they teach brotherhood, but they don't practice it on no day. They teach it on Sunday, but they don't practice it on no day. And my father would point out, his experiences in a lot of the communities that he visited and lived in prior to coming, down south and then from Tallahassee to Atlanta, that the majority of these communities were made up of foreigners that came here to study and work. And although the teachings of Islam taught this brotherhood, and it's like the activities of Islam, the 5 daily prayers and all of that, it pushed this brotherhood, right? And inculcated it. But he said still the attitude after they salam out was not of brotherhood. And in one of his writings, he said, the brother that stands next to me in the prayer, it's like he can't wait to salam out so he can flee back to white, almost, he said, to flee back to his suburban neighborhood in a form almost of a white flight. But he's my Muslim brother from such and such country, da, 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 da. So, he always, I guess, decried this type of feeling that he had early on. I mean, this is like the 70s. These writings were like from the early 70s. that I found. So for him for them, him and, you know, I mean, all of them to finally discover that, oh, my African heritage is colored all the way through with Islam. They didn't know that. They had no
MashaAllah.
idea the connection.
Yes. Thank you for that, Imam Ihsan. It reminded me of a conversation I was recently having with my sister. And I'll call her Dr. Kareem in this context because she was, during Black History Month in February, she was asked to come and speak about Islam in America, and especially from the origins of the Black or African American community. And I thought that she was kind of on this role, speaking of my sister, I thought she was kind of on this role with her lectures of speaking to the scholarship and the rich Islamic tradition within Medina Bay that she's recently discovered. And I thought that she was going to like make that kind of her platform for speaking about Blacks in Islam, but she was doing it here in Dallas and speaking to a mostly Arab Desi community. And I asked her about it, and I said, I was surprised that you weren't talking about, Tasawwuf and, the rich traditions in Medina Bay in Africa, right? Since that's, Black people there too. And she said, no, she said, because I realized that we're still at a place in American, Islam or in these American Muslim communities where they don't know how to deal with just their African-American brother that they see every day, right? That they're praying next to. Like they still, like she was like, the basics is we're still haven't gotten to the point where you automatically give salams to the African-American brother or sister. So she was like, we got to start there. We still have work to do in that area. We still have work to do with, the history of Islam in America and the rich traditions that African-Americans bring to that and how we still show up and, engage one another here. So what the point that you made just kind of spoke to that as well. So thank you for that. But yeah, but that's beautiful that, it is a surprise. Like you were talking about this image that you had of Africa, like between the Sahara and the jungle, and, the Pan-African thing of just like, definitely the culture and the rich traditions of, African culture, but then not, and then it was such a beautiful surprise for your parents to realize, but no, like Islam, the rich traditions of Islam from many generations ago is very vibrant in West Africa, where a lot of us, have ancestors. Mm-hmm. So if there's something you want to say, and if not, I'll move on to our next question.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was thinking of asking you, like, as a child going to Senegal, one, if you could just quickly tell us what age you were, and then did you understand why you were going to Senegal? And so I know that you just spoke about how, of course, your parents knew why you were going to Senegal. At the time you went, the age you were, and did you know at that time what your parents knew as far as why you were going there?
To get me on board, I mean, the way my father pitched it was, I want to take you on a trip, to the motherland. I want you to see Africa firsthand. And, we're going to be visiting Muslim Africa, and, we want to meet the Sheikh, and we want to see the school and all that. We're going to stay for a month. That was what he proposed. So, I was much less reluctant with that understanding to go. You know what I mean? Like, even like I said, like Suleiman, Muhammad, and Bilal, they all like, you're getting to go to the motherland, Africa. The Africa we always see in pictures and logos and this and that. You actually gonna go and be standing on it. Like they had the little medallion with Africa on it. You're gonna be standing on that just somewhere. So you're not excited, and they kept talking and talking and talking. So I kind of got a little, I was a little won over, and looking back, a side note, there's a power in having positive companionship. Because if they were like, yeah, man, I ain't trying to go to Africa, man, like Africa, I'm trying to stay here and get paid and blah, blah, blah. That would have been enough for me to like, I don't want to go. But these guys were like, as we were out there running in the street doing crazy stuff, they had this thing where they because we've been taught all this time about Africa, and they were excited to go. So being around them, that kind of like won me over a little bit. So, but the whole time, remember, I was going under the assumption that, we're going for a trip, we're going to stay for a whole month. we're gonna get to see, you know, this place, the country, move around, and so you know, so when we left from Atlanta to embark on the trip, it seemed like everybody was in on it because nobody slipped up in Atlanta. They were just like, oh, inshallah, have a good trip, and we see you when you get back, and make sure you bring us this, and make sure you bring us that, and take pictures. And so I had a little camera with me, and make sure you take, you know, a bunch of pictures. And okay, you know, alhamdulillah. So when we got to New York, we found out that Shaykh Hassan was actually in New York. He had just gotten there, and we stayed in New York for like a week and a half, or maybe a little less. It was in Ramadan, and that was in 1987. So Shaykh Hassan came here in Ramadan in 1987. That's my marker that I know he came here that year. I just recently found out via your interview with Sayyid Al-Kubra that he had came here before that in 1986, but I missed him by a year in Atlanta, right? So, and I think he made it to Atlanta in 87 as well. I'm not sure. So, Imam Saeed, rahimahullah, he was hosting us, him and Sister Salwa, rahimahullah, were hosting us and their family, Ajib and Zaki and Dooley, rahimahullah. Ahmed, I believe if Ahmed was there, no, it wasn't, Ahmed wasn't alive then. I believe Hassan was alive, but he was like a little baby if he was alive. He was real, real young. And their older brothers, Suleiman and Abdul Malik, you know, everybody was all there, you know, in Harlem. So they hosted us in Harlem back when they were living on, I believe it was West 130th and Convent or something. You know, I used to go there all the time, but you know, once they moved, it kind of like slipped out of my mind where they were. But I know they were somewhere on West 130th. And they hosted us there in Ramadan when we came. And we were due to depart from New York, going to Senegal in a week. But Sheikh Hassan was there. So alhamdulillah, we went and got a chance to meet him in person. And I just remember seeing him. I believe it was in Brother Issa. So there's two Issas in New York. And I can't remember which Issa it was. I know that Sister Karima, she would probably be able to, or even Sister Haja Ashaki would be able to like tell us where he was staying at that time. I'm not sure even if Shaykh was staying there, but he was at one of the Brother Issa's apartments in New York. And that's when I got a chance to meet Shaykh Hassan. I just shook his hand and he was just looking at me like directly in my eye. Like at the time I realized like something was going on. I don't know what it was, but because, you know, it wasn't, you know, normal for if you greet somebody and they just kind of look at you like that and not say anything. But he was looking at me and then somebody was introducing us at the same time, but he kind of still had my hand and was just looking at me. And yeah, I can't even begin to like talk about what was going through my chest at the time, but mashallah. So that was my first time seeing him in person, but actually here in New York. And my father got a chance to meet him. You know, and he assured my father that, you know, don't worry, you know, when you get there, I have people on the ground, they're gonna take care of everything. You know, Sister Creamer is there, you know, they're gonna host you, and you know, you won't miss me. You know, although I'm here, and I believe that year he went on a whirlwind tour. I think he went to Hajj that year, if I'm not mistaken, and stayed in Saudi for some time. Yeah. So, and did you see the message that Haji Ashaki, Auntie Ashaki put up?
Here now or
Yeah,
on our
she just
No,
posted.
I sent it to you directly, Imam.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was public.
I don't want to contradict you publicly. I just wanted to share what I remember.
The reason I mentioned your name, I was hoping that you would tap in so we could fill in that part. You know, that's not contradiction. That's just correcting the historical record. You know, so he was staying with Sister Auntie Ashaki and Brother Taha at the time, rahimahullah. But we met him at I believe it was maybe I don't know why I have it in my mind that he was, maybe he was at Issa's apartment for lunch or something like that, because I remember we ate. And
But I remember so clearly your father bringing him to our apartment. And I have to say, you were the cutest kid. Yeah, I do remember you coming there. That day, a whole bunch of different children came. Their parents brought them there.
Alhamdulillah. So see, alhamdulillah. So I get to correct that in my mind. So now I know
You
where
may very well have met Sheikh at Issa's.
uh,
Maybe when you came to my house, it wasn't the first time.
inshallah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So yes, I love that. The children are always so sweet in Medina Bay that are coming from the States to study there. And so again, how old were you? Were you?
I was 12.
You were 12. Okay. Yes. So that's still the cute stage. 12. Alhamdulillah. So yeah, so you're sharing about how you were touched by Shaykh Hassan radiallahu anhu. And Brother Muhammad Ali yesterday was talking about the dreams that he had, with Shaykh Hassan. I don't know if after that you had a dream and that sealed the deal for you to go to Medina Bay, but definitely you were inspired in that moment of meeting him in the flesh. And being touched by him and being seen by him, right? And the way that he looked at you and held that gaze and reassured you that you would be okay in his presence in Medina Bay. And so from there, let's say that's one of your early memories of Shaykh Hassan. I would like to talk a little bit more about once you got to Medina Bay and then your studies, and then particularly as it related to being in the presence of Shaykh Hassan while you were learning Quran and memorizing Quran. What were some of your greatest memories, takeaways, adventures during that time of learning Quran, becoming a Hafiz?
So even after meeting Shaykh Hassan that time, I still was just under the impression that I was going for a visit. It was Imam Saeed, rahimahullah, that kind of let the cat out the bag. The day that we were leaving, he was taking us to the airport when we were inside the living room, and he said, he's like the first person to make dua. And he said, may Allah, bless you to memorize the whole Quran, and it's going on and on. And wallahi, I can remember standing there looking at him. I was looking at him, he had this big old Quran on this on the table in his living room. And I looked at the Quran, I looked at him, and in my mind, I was saying, I know he's an Imam. I know he read the Quran countless times from front to back. Why do you think I'll be able to memorize the Quran in a month? That was in my head. That was how much I thought I was only going to stay for a month and come back. I mean, why would he say that's strange to me? Like, right? I didn't say that. I just it stuck in my head. And so we went and we arrived in Senegal, and I gotta say, even when I touched down, I was just like, I was full of foreboding, a sense of foreboding. Like there was something in my spirit. Like when I got off the plane, I looked back at the plane. It was kind of like, yeah, you're not gonna see that plane again. it was something in like, and it started there in New York. Like, why would he say that? Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? I think something is afoot. So we drove straight from the airport and went to Medina. So I never really saw Dakar like that. And, that part of Africa, or that part of Senegal, rather. Straight from the airport, stopped a couple of times on the road, and we got to Medina. Again, like Shaykh Hassan wasn't there. So, alhamdulillah, the kids that were there, they were very welcoming. Sister Karima, she was very welcoming. She, did all she could to to make us comfortable. So, I didn't really feel like, even though we completely different environment, completely different everything. This culture shock, super culture shock, taser culture shock. But I still remember, being comfortable in it. So she really went out of her way to welcome us. And my father, he kind of immemorialized that in a letter, because his real intention for himself, at least from this letter I found out, he planned to stay there 3 whole months, and he planned to leave me behind. He also wanted to work with Shaykh Hassan on some of his farming projects. But like I said, he ended up leaving because that trip of Shaykh Hassan's ended up, I think he was out of Medina for 3 whole months, at once, and even for him, that was long back then. So, he didn't really get chances to meet Shaykh Hassan in Senegal and, talk about those projects that he wanted his system, because my father, his his formal field of study was agriculture. That was his connection to Tuskegee University, because he came from Chicago of all places, right? And he came to Tuskegee University to study agriculture. And he even had a farm there in Tuskegee, and that was before, when that went one way, he finally left and went to Florida, and then from Florida back to Tuskegee. And then, so anyways, one of his things was he was interested in working on farm project with Shaykh Hassan, and so he intended to stay in 3 whole months. So we were, we kind of got into the groove. So he had some Ramadan in Senegal, as well as myself, and we kind of really got into the groove after Ramadan, because like I started school, but it was really, it was like right in the middle of Ramadan when we came. So when I started school, they were kind of getting ready to go on a vacation, Ramadan vacation. But I met my teacher and, all of that. And I remember sitting down for that first sit down where I met Sheikh Rahimahullah. It was me, my father, Sheikh Batay, Hafiz Ahmed was translating, and Sister Karima was there. And, my father, he got to field all his questions about the school and, whatever his concerns were and all of that. So I can't remember if Sister Karima mentioned it or Ahmed mentioned it. But, they were like, my father said, I heard that, that they practice corporal punishment or corporal discipline in the school, right? And, they kind of wanted to minimize that part of it. And they were like, yeah, and after all of that, they were saying, my father turned directly to my teacher and was saying, it was like, but this one, I beat him. He needs to get beat. I remember looking at him like, man, like, how you going to sell me out like that? Like, what did I do? But yeah, there was plenty that we were doing back home that, caused him to say that. Like, yeah, all the discipline that you can muster, make sure you share it with this one right here. I think he's going to need that. Basically, like, I give you full permission to, whatever involves, is like, if you're going to chain somebody to the school, like, he needs all of that. So I remember seeing my teacher's eyes, like, looked at me, and he was just like, It's like, I have you now, like, I've been given, the green light for you. So
no, tell me, and tell me. So that is the other teachers, not so much, Sheikh Hassan. I imagine that he has this like grand like imam role there, but so from that, can you tell us a little bit more about your interactions with Sheikh Hassan? How frequent were they while you were memorizing Quran? Because, he was, like you said, like on this worldwide tour at that time. And so how often did you engage with Sheikh Hassan during your time in Medina by becoming a Hafiz?
So when Sheikh Hassan came back, because, I was there for like 3 whole months, I didn't really get to see Sheikh Hassan. We just, kind of going to school. And when Sheikh Hassan got back, it was like, everything kind of like shifted gear. Like, we would be going to his house a lot. And in those days, Shaykh Hassan would want to see you at Fajr. And I mean, he had this uncanny ability. If you, well, all those people, how Fajr is in Medina. Fajr is like Juma here, and even to go after Shaykh Hassan leaving the masjid and greet him, there's so many people jocking just to shake his hand, just to touch him, just to, just to be seen by him, just lay eyes on me, Sheikh. Like, I just if I can't reach your hand, I just want Sheikh to like just sweep his glance and look at, so he used to like really like I used to find that amazing that I might go visit Shaykh Hassan, and we would see him a few times a week. Even though at that time the school wasn't across the street from his house, the school was in Yellow House, so it was several, Medina blocks away. So we didn't get the chance to see him sometime every day at his house, but we got the chance to see him at the masjid. And if you visited him in his house and you were late to Fajr, you didn't make it, he'd be like, son, what happened to you at Fajr today? Be like, huh? I was there. He's like, I didn't see you. I didn't see you. Put your head down and be like, Sheikh, I was late. Because we would, rush up to his house. As soon the minute we heard, Malam Baraya, Rahimahullah, and Sidi Anyas crank up the zikr, before Shaykh Hassan come out the room, that was like, you got the first adhan, then you got the second adhan for Fajr. Then we would still be, kind of pressing snooze. We didn't have no alarm clock, but we pressing snooze, still like, still get the last couple of minutes. But as soon as you heard, and we were here 7 blocks away, either Malam Braya or Malam Anyas crank up, Allah, la ilaha. It was like completely silent. So we would hear it come over the wind all the way from Chicago's house. That's when we jump up and be like, uh-oh. Everybody runs, spill out to the bathroom, making wudu, and hoofing at the Sheikh house. Sometimes we run in late. Sheikh Hassan might come out immediately after they start, or he might just walk out and then they'll start making the zikr. Sometimes they'll make the zikr before he come out, and we would get like a heads up. But sometimes, and we could tell by their cadence, right? Whether it was Malam Barai or Malam Anyas, by their cadence, we could tell if Sheikh Hassan was on the move. It would be like a different zikr they do. Their cadence would change up. So we rushing up to go, try to greet him before we go in the masjid and join that procession. If you miss that procession, Sheikh Hassan still would be able to, even all that whole crowd when he come out, greet him, he would note. He would be like, some people come greet him, he'd be like, you wasn't at Fajr today. Like Sheikh, some people, they were bold. They'd be like, Sheikh, I was there. He's like, no, you wasn't. And they just put their head down like, no, I wasn't. I slept. I slept the Fajr. Sheikh, he's like, I know you weren't there. So, we would see him a lot then at the masjid, and every now and then we'd be able to go visit him at his house.
And excuse me, Imam Ihsan, on that point, on that story, can you tell me about how many Americans were with you there at that time? And because I'm wondering if there is something about Sheikh Hassan, I'm imagining this, that maybe he noticed that the etiquette or like the practice of making sure that you got up early for Fajr and went to the masjid was something that wasn't very highly cultivated, possibly in, the young group of American murids that were there, and just wanting to make, that was something he wanted to focus on, or he wanted to make sure that you guys were doing. Is there any truth to that, or about like how many of you guys were there at the time from the state?
Well, the number of us at the time, I'd have to count. I believe we were like 25 guys and young ladies all together, maybe 25, 28 or something like that. I could definitely like go down a list and count everybody that was there. But I think we were like right under 30. And
how many of you were men? Was it more of a practice for the boys, or to come out to, because I guess coming to the masjid for Fajr, is that more something that's expected for the boys, the men?
I mean, I believe some of the girls used to come out for sure. Since the Supreme would be at Fajr, every Fajr, like clockwork. The girls, with the girls is always a little different, because some of them, there are times where they are not praying. You know what I'm saying? So, to be able to keep watch on it, I mean, even if they were coming, I had a regular habit of coming, if, days they weren't there, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be a big thing, because, they had jurisprudence reason to not be there. But for the boys, there's no reason. If you gotta get there unless you're sick. Now, if you were sick, then Shaykh Hassan found out about it, he might even stop by Yellow House to see you in those early days. In terms of like we alhamdulillah, at least those of us that came from Oglethorpe Avenue community, they had inculcated that we had that kind of in the West End. Shoot, between West End Masjid and Old Hope Avenue Masjid, you had two adhans going on at Fajr time. And the neighbors, they didn't mind it because West End, as you know, is a real cultural community. It was always the peace and love community, the Rasta community and the Muslims. So everybody practice some form of, meditation or something, the Yoruba community there in the morning. So it was like the adhan to them was like, it's time to get up. We didn't really have anybody kind of like giving us any fight about that. So we did have that, but something just jumped in my mind when you mentioned that about Shaykh Hassan and just his insistence and making sure that, we got in the habit of being a Fajr on time. Imam Fakhruddin, he mentioned that one of the things that really sealed the deal with him to be a student of Shaykh Hassan and, his history of, kind of where he was from, being from Medina Munawwara, he's had the chance to like sit down with so many different shuyukh and be in their intimate presence from different turuq. He said, what's shocking is that, none of them, not shocking, but he said what he noted about Shaykh Hassan was that his insistence in praying on time, especially with Fajr, it's almost like his secret. And I'm sure that a lot of his biological children and the bigger students of Shaykh Hassan and those who spent more time with him, they'll always attest to that. Like Shaykh Hassan was, like he was you say, people joke about, being Team Fajr. He was the captain of Team Fajr. He was he was the global champ, he was the global captain of Team Fajr. He always on time for Fajr, he didn't play with it. And Imam Fakhruddin mentioned to the effect that was one of the things that won him over. Like he saw him in action doing everything that you were supposed, that someone was supposed to do when it comes to the 5 daily prayers and and the 5 pillars, that he really was firm on all of them. Right. And he said that's what pulled him to just submit to Shaykh Hassan a complete 100% and just leave everybody else behind. And so, it was definitely his thing. Like, it was Fajr was like, for us, it was like Fajr was a small Juma. And that was every morning that Shaykh Hassan was in town. We always wish that he could be around even more. But, at that time, that's when he started traveling a lot. So when he was there, it was like, it wasn't like a chore for us. It wasn't like a punishment. Oh, I gotta get up and go to Fajr. We would be excited on our own to get up. We would still be, battling with our own love for sleep and want to get that last sleep because we know we had to go to school right after, but we would, especially on the weekends, we would love to go. It got to the point where we couldn't even do it during the week. Like Shaykh Hassan was like, nah, y'all got, we would start school way before the first adhan for Fajr. So, that was a experience that we got in the beginning. But then, he was like, when he switched the time on us, we were the first school in Medina to really go that early. I think the only school that started going as early as us was the Martanian school with the bars on it, where a lot of Sheikh Ibrahim's children actually graduated from. But to answer that, yeah, like Fajr was a big thing. And, in hindsight, we see that, it was one of his secrets, so to speak.
Alhamdulillah. Yes. And so, Imam Ihsan, if you could tell us, so you were there for 3 months and then your father left. And then when did you realize that this was a legit, life transforming experience of becoming you were there to become a Hafiz of Quran? And when did that start? When did you accept that was your role there in Medina Bay? And how long did it take you to learn all of the Quran?
So my father didn't stay the whole 3 months. Once he found that Shaykh Hassan was going to be still on his tour, he actually shortened his trip to 1 month. And like towards the end of that month, and it's gonna sound silly, he, like maybe 3 days before he left, he sat me down and he was like, flight is leaving, a change of flight and it's, it's leaving such and such day, but I'm going, you're going to stay. And I think I had vertigo at the moment. Like everything started spinning around me. He started spinning around me. I was just like in shock. And it's to give you a idea in how my mind worked at the time as a little kid. I was like, I'm going home. I know where he's keeping the ticket. So I waited till he went to make salat. As soon as they called the adhan, he would get, ready and leave. But, the young people in the house, they wouldn't leave until, it was almost, the apartment is like they almost had the timings down. They once they heard the adhan, they knew they had such and such minutes to like still, play and run around and just lay out until, they knew that the adhan was going to be called. Then they would rush up the street to the masjid. My father left. And I went out, looked around, check the coast, make sure the coast was clear. And I went in his bag and he had taken the tickets, the passports and everything and put it in his little pouch with him that he kept. And before that, he was keeping it in the bag, but I guess he already knew I was going to try something. So I looked at his bag, I was searching the whole bag. He's taking everything important out. There wasn't nothing in there but clothes and toiletries. I was like, oh, Allah. And I realized like I was stuck. And the day came and, he packed his bags up with little ceremony. I mean, if anybody who remember my father, he didn't talk a lot. So there was very little sort of ceremony or, drama. He just picked his bags up. The taxi pulled up. He put his bags in the taxi and he turned around. I came out outside the gate, the yellow house, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he was like, make sure you do hard, make sure you study, and when you finish, you come home, bring you home. And he jumped in the taxi and pulled off. I stood there watching that taxi till it got all the way up the dirt road or Yellow House Road and busted left on the main road and was out of sight. I was still out there. And I remember that, Ahmed and Adam and all of them, nobody was laughing. They were just kind of like watching me like, man, they're kind of feeling sorry for me. So I went down, sat down on the steps and like somebody just patted me on the back and they just all went in the room and let me stay out there. And like a little baby out there crying. And the next day I got myself together. I was like, okay, I'm gonna by that time, I been in school and, talking to the kids and, kind of like learning what certain benchmarks were and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, when I finished the first hizb, I'm going home. And that used to produce peals of laughter from them. I mean, like real roll in the sand in the yard laughter, kicking in the sand. Like, this guy, he still is like, he's like straight disillusioned. Like he really think he's gonna go home. First of the month, it was like suddenly, okay, when I finish, I'm in his, and at some point, I guess it was like when Shaykh Hassan got back, I just really accepted the inevitability of my being there. You know what I mean? Like it was really when he got back that I kind of accepted that. The whole time in between that whole 3 months, I had all the grand plans of, when I get here, when I get to this point, I'm gonna, and the whole time now, anytime I got a chance on an off day, I would take whatever little money I had and go all the way to Cowlett, get me a stamp and write a letter and send it to my mom, just telling her all this stuff, So my mind, I was like, I'm gonna start writing my mom and get her to get me out of here. But I'm gonna like do it when I finish Amma, so I can like have some currency to get out of here. Like, look, I did something. Now I want to come back home, but all of that fell through when Shaykh Hassan came back. It was just like, I don't know. He used to talk to us and he used to give us these pep talks sometimes. Because even the older students like Amina and Ahmed who had been there, before me, sometimes they would feel like, I don't know if I can do this, Sheikh. And, of course, Amina Karima, she was the more vocal, she had a different type of relationship with Shaykh Hassan, so, she could speak her mind. And he'd be like, you can do it. You can do it. Don't say, oh, I'm too old or I'm from America. you know, I wasn't born a Muslim. That I said, no, you can do it. And Allah, He can give you whatever from the is one of the things you should say. Is it from the salt that your wife used to cook the food to the position of being of kutubaniya? It's the same for Allah. It's not different for Him. So just ask Him, and then He'll give it to you. Just work hard and ask Allah, He'll give it to you. So He will give us, different pep talks, and we would start to see it, like, and the people in Medina. There were some people in Medina who would look at Shaykh Hassan's American school as like a play project. Like, oh, look, Shaykh Hassan got the little American kids here in school. Oh, that's cute. And we would get that from some of the kids. Like, kids would hear stuff from adults, and, we would get that from them. Like, oh, y'all, they thought we were playing, or they thought it was just like a little project or a little, experiment. And of course,
I was going to say, do you feel that that was a big inspiration for you, that competition to learn Quran and like show them like, hey, we Americans can do just as well?
Big time. We had friends that didn't attend our school that maybe lived around Yellow House, and they went to other larger schools like Dada, Sitting Low, who else? Dada, Suleiman Sek. There were other Quran schools that were fully established. They'd already kicked out Hafiz, boys and girls, and here's this upstart school. That Shaykh Hassan is throwing his weight behind. It's his school, and they ain't cranked out nobody. That's just a little experiment with American kids. But some of them you saw, they were like, because we would chop it up, we would play soccer with each other, and casually asking each other, "What surah you on?" Or "What hizb you on?" And then, we were like, I'm on such and such hizb, and you could see it in their eyes, like, hi, these guys is really trying to like come up. They're really trying to come up. And Ahmed, he dashed all of that when he finished, and not only finished, but when he recited and went through the gauntlet, just like everybody else, he went through the gauntlet and recited in front of Shaykh Hassan and all the other teachers and everybody. It was a big gathering to come here and to hear him recite on all 4 nights. So, him, when he recited, he did it in 15, 15, 15, 15. So he recited the whole Quran in 4 days doing his test. And you could tell the energy had changed in Medina. After that first recitation, it was like, oh, these guys are for real. Not just, us as students, but like, Shaykh Hassan not playing. These teachers, they're not playing. This is a school that's like really on the, so Ahmed is finishing, like it put Shaykh Hassan school really on the map as a contender. And, by that time we were already in this kind of like, silent competition with other schools. And, so yeah, that was a thing.
Alhamdulillah. Yes. That healthy competition, right?
Even within the same school, and different teachers. Like I would be in my classroom, and Umar C's classroom was across the way. We would be looking at each other's boards. Like I would sneak in the Umar C's classroom when school was over and be like checking certain students. Because at that time we weren't studying out of the Quran. We were still studying from the wooden slate, the wooden boards. So I would go in and like check Shaykh Hassan's daughter Fatima board, see where she was at, and be like, yeah, I'm coming. And I would look at certain person's board, and there was a real sense of competition going on. It was real.
Alhamdulillah. And the Imam Ihsan, so from that point, so how long did it take you to finish, to recite?
So, from the time I got there to when I finished, I would say about 5 years.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
I stayed a little while on after that before I came back. About 5 years.
Okay. And the picture that we see in front, do you see this picture? Have I shared it correctly? Yeah. This is when you recite it, or after your ceremony of reciting the Quran?
So this was a day before my final recitation. When I went to do my test, it was also in Ramadan. And the way I had it in my mind and the way I proposed it to Shaykh Hassan, I was like, I want to do mine in 3 days. I wanted to do it, but break it up into smaller recitation. So like, see, the Ahmed, he did his in 4 days. That's like the traditional one, where you come and recite 15 Hazab or his in every day until you complete the whole Quran in 4 days. So I told Shaykh Hassan I want to do mine in 3, but I want to do like 10 in the morning, 10 at night, 10 in the morning, 10 at night since Ramadan. So he was like, okay, Bismillah. Like if we start this day, then we'll finish right before Eid. But something happened. That's a funny story too. Something happened, and what we missed one of my recitations. So Eid came, and I ended up having that 1 day left. So this is a picture of us about to go to Eid, but it was like right in the middle of right before I finished, like right before my last recitation.
Alhamdulillah. And I see, is that Mama Tahida in the background?
Like everybody in this, I'm gonna say not everybody, but so many people behind me passed away already. Tahida, rahimahullah, Brother Ahmed Tijani Favors, rahimahullah, he's right there behind me. And then Sheikh Hassan is there. Then Salihu, that was Sheikh Hassan's door person, right behind Sheikh Hassan. He passed on as well.
Inshallah. Yes. And
he was one of those people. He was one of those people that knew Sheikh Hassan from way back, and he was one of the original people who came to Tallahassee. But like I said, they used to play the Sheikh Hassan close to the chest. Like I never remember. I was a little kid, so I mean, I'm sure he might have mentioned the Sheikh Hassan to the adults or whatever. But I didn't know the connection between him being from Detroit, coming down to Tallahassee, and his connection with Shaykh Hassan until he came one day to Senegal and saw me in the Quran school. And I saw him and I knew him immediately who he was. He saw me and remembered me, even though I was a little itty bitty kid when I was in Tallahassee. He saw me and remembered me. And he was like, you, Sister Radia and Brother Durahim's son from Tallahassee. And I was like, yeah. You remember me? And I was like, from Tallahassee, yeah, right when you came. He was like, yeah. And I was just shocked, like, how, I think I asked him, like, how you connected to Shaykh? How you know? He just laughed at me, like, I knew about Shaykh Hassan, before Tallahassee.
MashaAllah. Yeah. Was he there in Senegal regularly, or did he come specifically for your closing ceremony?
No. He would come and visit periodically. He would come visit Shaykh Hassan periodically. And he happened to come for Ramadan that year, because they didn't know I was about to finish. And that was kept on super wraps. That's not something that, with social media now, people are, they tend to kind of overshare. But that was something that was kept on wraps. Even with Shaykh, I mean, put it like this, we kept it on such wraps that my fellow students did not know. And that was another thing. I got that, that, hey, certain things you keep under wraps until you achieve it. So I didn't tell anybody that I was about to recite. I didn't tell anybody. I went straight to Chicago and I went to my teacher. Nobody else knew. The teachers in Medina, they knew because they all came to recite and to watch, for the test. Chicago summoned them, but I specifically wanted to do it when everybody was on vacation, so they wouldn't even know. And that's why I chose that. So I picked the time out. I picked that time out. I went to Chicago. At the time, my teacher, he had me like, under wraps. So if I wasn't in the school, I was at his house. If I wasn't in his house, his brother had a house that he was partially building way out there in Dar Rahmati. And he put up the kitchen in the house and the walls, and he would send me to that place in that kitchen with the tin roof to go study and be like, don't leave there until I send somebody to come get you. So I'd be in there sweating all on top of my Quran in that oven of a room, so between there, his house, and the school, nobody was seeing me at this, towards the last few months, because it just got real intense, like it's time to wrap it up. So me, it was dragging out. So I was like, man, look, I put it all together in my head. I said, I want to do it when everybody's on vacation so they won't know. 1. 2, I want to do it right at the end of Ramadan, but in Ramadan, so I could get that, the blessing of doing it in Ramadan. And I want to do it in 3 days. I don't even want to do it in 4 days. I want to be finished faster than that. So I went to go see Shaykh Hassan. He was out of town and he came in, so Medina had like turned all the way up, Sheikh is in town. Like, so everything was like getting festive, extra festive because it was already Ramadan. So I kind of snuck over and I knew Shaykh Hassan, was going to ask if I just all I had to do was show my face. I wasn't open enough to be talking to Sheikh like that all the time. I didn't used to do that. But I knew if I just show my face and say Assalamu alaikum, that he would open that conversation. So I did, and he did, and I had it ready. And I was like, Sheikh, I'm ready. And of course, my teacher, he was of a different opinion. He knew better. He's the teacher, but I was like, I'm ready, Sheikh. I feel like I'm going. It's like, one day I'm all the way on point, and the next day I got some mistakes. I'm like, it's not gonna get no better than this. I need to just do it. And said, I'm ready. He said, huh? Like, it was, he was kind of just casually greeting and talking to other people around. But when I said that, it was like the eye of Sauron, like in the Lord of the Rings movie. It was like the eye just like focused back on me, like just me. Like, he said, huh? Ready? I was like, yes. I felt like all the butterflies. I was completely full of butterflies. But I stood my ground. So he was like, okay, when you want to start? I told him exactly the day I wanted to start. And then I was like, because I hadn't really heard anybody doing it like that. I wanted to do it like that. I said, I want to do it in 3 days. I want to do 10 in the morning and 10 in the evening. There was another reason for that. It was because comparison with a lot of other students, I didn't recite as fast as them. I wasn't able to go as fast. I felt like, if I tried to, I would, start to lose my place and lose my focus. So I knew 15 hizb in one sitting was going to be long. Like, I put people to sleep. And so I was like, I want to do it like 10 hizb in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, 10 at night. And Shaykh Hassan was like, so okay. Bismillah. He said, I'm going to talk to your teacher. I said, okay, alhamdulillah. When I left out and went back to the school, as soon as I walked through the doorway to school, I got snatched, like, from the back of my collar. And my teacher was hiding behind the door, the gate of the school. And he was like, hey, why'd you go over to Shaykh Hassan's house? What's wrong with you? He said, Shaykh Hassan, going to ask you about, about the business. If you go over there, what happened? No. He said, Shaykh Hassan asked you about the business. Why would you go over there? And I just put my head down. He's like, did you see him? And I was like, yes. He's like, yeah. Everybody knows Sheikh Rahimahullah. They know what I'm talking about. He's like, when you saw him, what happened? I said, he asked me if I was ready. He was like, yeah. He was like, what did you say? I said, yes. Oh, he fell apart. He just walked away. He just walked away, la. Walked to the school, walked to the class, and walked back. There's so much drama. And he was just like, ready. You told me you ready? He's like, yeah. He's like, okay, bye. All right.
And that's such a reflection upon the teacher, is that he was nervous about how that reflected upon him as
he
well.
He was nervous about how it reflected on Shaykh Hassan first. See,
okay.
One of the things Sidi Hanif pointed out to me, he's like, a lot of the teachers, today, mashallah, that are teaching in Shaykh Hassan school, they might not be Taliban or Shaykh Hassan. They just hired him off the strength of, they know of them, their resume, that they're, excellent teachers, whatever. But in those days, all the teachers were Taliban or Shaykh Hassan. So their main concern was Shaykh Hassan first. Like, I can't have you embarrassing Shaykh Hassan. Forget about me. I mean, I'm secondary, but you can't get up there and embarrass Shaykh Hassan because he putting everything on the line for you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm nervous. I'm nervous that you're gonna get up there and fold. But he was like, okay, since you pulled, after he got over like all the drama, he was like, Bana, as to say, you know, though that for him, that's everything. It's like, oh, you think you ready? Okay, since you want to pull the trigger, we're gonna make sure you're ready. And after that, like nobody saw me. The only time they saw me was at Shaykh Hassan house, and immediately after we recite, I would go straight back to my teacher room with him, and it was like no sleep. I don't even remember sleeping. I don't remember sleeping.
And this, Imam Ihsan, this was during the time that you started your recitation. So after the different segments of it, you would go back and just kind of get even more prepared for the following.
Yeah, you could call it that. You could definitely call it that. So I think I gave myself like, you know, maybe like 3 or 4 days before we started. So that was a mistake. So basically, you know, I was on pins and needles until, you know, our first recitation. So we started in the morning. I believe it was on a Thursday morning. And you know, I was determined that you know, I got it what my teacher was saying. You know, I look, you have to be all the way on point. You can't even be like everybody else. You know, there's a certain amount of mistakes that are assumed and allowed. Recitation, but you gotta be better than that. So he was like, I think either I told him or he just assumed. He was like, you know, and this is something that Shaykh Hassan had told us before. He said, you know, when you stand in front of, what did I ask him? I think this was early on, before I ever even did a khutbah, but I asked him something, I can't remember what it was, but he was just like, he said, yeah, you know, even me, I would be nervous to stand in front of people and give a khutbah. And I was looking at him like, you? And he's like, yes, except, you know, there's special things that I do before I get up in front of the Muslims and stand in front of them. You know, that enabled me to be able to do that without, you know, falling apart, basically, like, you know, to kind of paraphrasing his words, but without, you know, seizing up, I'd be nervous and standing in front of him. He said, and the way he said was that the Muslim that has something called hurma with them. I don't know how to define that exactly. I looked it up at one time, but it's just like this. There's something with the Muslim, with them praying and making zikr and all this, is that when you look at them, you stand up in front of them, too many of them in front of you is gonna make you just nervous. And you're gonna feel it. It's gonna be the energy gonna make you nervous. But you know, it's like there's things that you do before you do that, so that you won't fall apart. You'll be able to stand in front of them and address them. And my teacher was like, just look down. Don't look up. Do not look up. So that first recitation, I did that. I didn't look up. This was the time when Shaykh Hassan had just built the house, what they quote unquote the new house for his wives, and he had, you know, the upstairs for himself, and that place wasn't even finished. So they put a tent. They were still building it. So they put this nice big Mauritanian tent up there. You know, the Mauritanian tent, like white and black on the outside. You go on the inside, it's like rich. That's what had us to do the recitation. And when we came in and started, it was my teacher, Umar C, and Ustaz Umar C, and Ustaz Lamba, who was the teacher at Shaykh Hassan's father's house in Kirpa. He was the teacher in that school. And of course, Ustaz Lamba, he was a super veteran. You know, all of I think mostly all of Sidi Ali Cisse, rahimahullah, his children, at some point in time, they was in Dar al-Lamba. If they wasn't in Dar al-Lamba, they might have been in the Mauritanian school with the Mauritanian teacher, Wuld Rabbani. And most of them got sent to Mauritania to finish anyway. But a lot, you know, so he was a hardened veteran. And Umar C was there, Hafiz Suleiman's teacher, and my teacher. When I tell you that my look down game was so on point that when I finished and I looked up, The whole tent was completely full. Sheikh Hassan was there, and I didn't know. I didn't even feel anybody else had came in there. I just looked up and was shocked. The whole tent was full. But that kind of messed me up for the rest of the time. I was like, oh man, I didn't know this many people were gonna come out. You know what I mean? Like, but that first time, and I didn't, alhamdulillah, I didn't even have a stop. I just blew through it the first 10 with no mistake. So alhamdulillah, that was real good because Shaykh Hassan had guests. You know, the guests were coming for Ramadan. So that's what made it even, it was like so many other people were there. It was him, you know, our teachers, the teachers of the other big schools in Medina, teachers from the smaller schools, and then all these guests. I remember even MD Yusuf, rahimahullah, he was there from Nigeria. So everybody was, it was a lot of people there.
MashaAllah. And was Imam Ihsan, was your father able to come, or your parent? No, MashaAllah. I wonder. Yes, I wonder if he saw that in his vision when he left you there 5 years before, inshallah. But just getting you ready. I mean, that was such an amazing, that's such a critical part of your life, right? In your development as a young man to manhood from 12 to 17. And it was just all preparing you for the role that you have now as Imam of your family and also the communities, alhamdulillah, which we're going to pivot into or talk about. But is there one last thing you want to say about that experience and what you remember in this moment before we move on to talk about life after becoming a Hafiz and returning back to the States, inshallah?
I mean, you said it. I mean, it was just the main pivot point. It was the main pivot point was, if you could say, the rite of passage for me. Yeah, that was like walking through a portal, you know, and emerging somewhere else. Yeah.
Subhanallah, alhamdulillah. Yes. And so when I reached out to your mother, your beautiful mother, very wise. And so her question was for me to ask you, when did you realize, and she probably has had this conversation with you, when did you realize, and I added, actualize your personal calling for memorizing Quran? Like, what was the purpose behind it? When did you come to terms with, you know, why your father left you there, why Allah put you in that beautiful position to learn Quran in the motherland? Yes, and to be a model of what an African-American, you know, from the inner city, what he could do with the Quran. And, you know, when did you realize the goal of memorize Quran as far as teaching it to others? Or would you say that was the main goal? And when did you realize that? When did you come to terms with that? What did that look like?
Being in Medina was the real catalyst for all of that, right? I mean, I think if I was in America and, you know, somebody had found me a teacher and put me on a farm somewhere to study, I wouldn't have gotten any of that. I probably would have memorized the Quran and be like, okay, let me get back to my life. But being in that total enveloping atmosphere where, like my father say, where you really see Islam being practiced and not talked about. That was one of the things that stand out to me from him. That was one of his takeaways. Like, we talk about Islam and we pontificate and all that, but here, nobody be pontificating and standing on the corner talking. People just going about and living Islam doing in their life, and that's what we got. Like, it was just a different imprint altogether. And then seeing Shaykh Hassan teaching all the time, just the way he moved, being a teaching moment all the time. Every moment when it was like a teaching moment. And he always will be talking about Quran, Prophet ﷺ said, and then, you know, sometimes, you know, what Sheikh Ibrahim said. So like, you got the sense that Quran is this man's, like, his foundation. You know what I mean? And then when you in Medina, you see that Quran is the foundation of this place. Like, everybody is just Quran is undergirding them. Like my father said, there's 6 and 7-year-old children who memorize the entire Quran who you won't even be able to lead in prayer. he said I would never be able to lead anybody in prayer here in 1,000 years. So everybody is Quran. He said he happened to be there during the jungle camel one time. He said, and this is it's funny because he used to raise bees on the farm. He said the masjid sounds like a beehive humming with Quran. And he said you hear this humming all throughout the village, almost at every time of day, except when the kids get off for break. It's like you walk by, it's Quran school here, Quran school there, it's Quran everywhere. So it's like, I don't know, it's like just waves. It's like being broadcast through you. It's like you getting some kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, but at some point between being with Sheikh and you know him giving us kind of these pep talks that weren't really pep talks, and just being himself. I mean, and us being in that, you know. Oh, Kaba wanted me to explain Giant Camel. So Giant Camel is when you know, they at the time of the year where they summon all of the Quran schools and the teachers and everybody connected to Medina Bay to come to Medina, and they get together in the masjid for like 3 days and read the entire Quran over and over and over again. And each school or each group, they'll record how many times that they completed with this together with their students and their people. And then there's one person or a couple of people that are responsible for tally, making all the complete tallies. And then at the end, they'll let the Sheikh know how many times they completed. And then there's a big dua for Medina Bay, for all the students, for everybody. So this happened like once a year. They do this. And they call it Janga Kamil, which just means like to reciting complete recitations of the Quran. I think the last one, if Sedaku were present, she would probably tell us it was some inordinate amount of times that they completed the Quran. You know how we get happy if we recite the Quran once a month and make dua, and when we see the benefit of that immediately. So you can just imagine that, you know, how that what that's doing. So they do that every year, and we got the chance to see that. So it was all of that coming together, you know, to the point where even your peer group, the kids you with, you go out on the street and you play soccer, and you much like other kids, you know what I'm saying? You do some little bad things here and there, and you know, you get into some naughtiness. But at the end of the day, like, we were all, you know, kind of, they, at least at that point, had not even accepted, like, this was like, they took it for their own thing. Like, yeah, I'm going to finish Quran and do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to finish Quran and do X, Y, and Z. And being in that companionship with them, you know, doing regular kid stuff. And then, you know, there's this other element where we're talking about Quran and finishing Quran, and, you know, this huge competition. And like, you know, oh, what his view on? Oh yeah, I'm about to catch you, or da-da-da-da. What his view on? I pass you. I'm on this. You know, that also, you know, played a part into it. Because as a child, I mean, it's kind of hard to visualize. I'm gonna be an adult. I can be an adult one day and da-da-da. But seeing Shaykh Hassan and seeing the other shuyukh and seeing the other teachers and what they were doing with Quran and how it figured into, you know, grown life. I mean, you did get a chance to see it in your like in front of you. In terms of like imagining yourself in that position, that was a whole different type of thing. So I don't know if I never imagined myself having to be in a position of Imam or nothing like that. But for sure, after a certain time, I for sure, I was like, I'm gonna, whatever I learn in the Quran, I'm gonna be teaching it. And even to my teacher, you know, in Senegal, one of the traditional things about traditional Quran school is that when you get to a certain point, your teacher may appoint you as, well, actually, traditionally, when you finish Quran and then you come back to the school, you know, you come back to school, but, you know, you're no longer studying. You come back to write the Quran after that. That was a traditional style. After you recite it, then you would come back and write it from memory. My teacher, because we were still an upstart school, right? He didn't have people that he finished already to basically, what's the word I'm looking for? To be an understudy, not an understudy, but I can't, it'll come to me. So after I got to a certain point, I used to love to like practice writing and stuff. I would write in the sand. I would write with chalk. Anywhere I was, I would take a piece of rock and be writing on somebody's wall, just practicing. So my handwriting got kind of good. So my teacher would be like, okay, after you say your lesson and you write your lesson, put your board to the side and write these little kids over here. So he wouldn't have to do it. So real early on, I was kind of that's the word I was looking for, apprenticing. I was apprenticing under him. And he would say it from time to time, like, yeah, when you got to put it in your mind, when you go back, you doing this not to go back and sit down and just do whatever. You have to learn Quran and you have to take it back to your people. He understood that. A lot of people in Medina didn't understand like the dearth of the availability of studying Quran or teachers of Quran. They had no concept of that. But my teacher, he traveled a little bit, so he understood. He'd never been to America, ever. He passed away not ever coming to America, but just in some small travels, he understood, like, when we explained to him, he got a clear vision of, there is nothing like that there. So he will always say, like you have to be able to teach. You have to be able to hit the ground running and teach Quran. So not only, was I learning from him like that, but I was also apprenticing as a teacher, like early on. Early on. So when I finished Quran, I only got to write like 4 times. Like I only wrote the first 2 hizb from memory. And then my teacher was like, I look back and I think it was kind of shiesty, but he would like listen to everybody, and he would get up and be like, okay, right, everybody. I'm going to handle some special business. That was code word for I'm going to hang out with Sheikh Akibu and drink attaya and eat lunch. But so I didn't really get a chance to finish writing all the way from memory. I remember the first one I wrote. I took it to Shaykh Hassan and he checked it. He went through, he said, okay, this one, no, this is cough, not calf. This vowel, this is this vowel, this that vowel, just whatever mistakes I made, and he corrected them. And he was like, mashallah, it's good, keep doing it. And I think I did like maybe 2 more, 3 more, maybe 3 more after that. My teacher was like, okay, you put your board to the side, just write all these guys here, and I'll be back. And that's how that started. So I didn't get a chance to finish writing from memory. I ended up kind of doing it, just writing everybody else's lessons in the school.
Alhamdulillah. I'm sure that was great training ground for you and what you did.
It was good training. So by the time I finished, and then by the time I finished, that was already ingrained in my mind that as soon as I touch down, I'm going to teach. I got younger siblings. I'm gonna start with them and build a school from there. That I did have that in my mind.
And Imam Ihsan, can we talk about that? So you came back and, fast forward, you've had Quran schools, Muslim schools that you've been a part of the, establishing team, trial and error and succeeding and then having to stop and start something new. So can you talk about that experience, where you are now in that journey of being maybe like one of the teachers of a Quran school, a founder of a Quran school, and how that's going now, or how is that showing up in your life now? Where are you at this point with that?
So mashallah, now it's like, I had big dreams of, coming back and starting a school where people will be able to memorize Quran, from Alif Ba Ta to Jinnah to Anas. Unfortunately, it never panned out that way. We got real close with some students, but the environment it it really makes a difference. You know, it's almost like that I still have in the back of my mind that I'll be able to create a full-time school, like almost like, you know, along the lines of what Sayyidat Cooper doing, but away from the city. Full-time, internal, you know, you get this little break on the weekends, you know, where we manage the device time and all of that. And we'd be far away enough from the city center where parents will be discouraged, you know, from trying to visit them a whole lot and all of that. Maybe they might, the kids can go home once a month, you know, for a weekend, you know. So that dream is still there. But like the people in the environment kind of have shaped the effort from when we started to now to being kind of like a prep school, a Quran prep school. And mashallah, you know, we say alhamdulillah for that, for being able to do anything. A few of the students who did really well here with us, you know, that caused their parents to see the potential, whereas before, you know, they might not have seen it, not been all the way on board. And you know, once they you know, that pushed them to go ahead and make that move to Senegal, where their child finished. Some of those I can mention are our sister Majida. Majida studied with us here in Atlanta until she got to like Ar-Rahman. And, you know, she was pretty vocal about hers. She was like, you know, I don't think, I can't do it here. Like when I go home, I'm still like, when I go home, I'm like back at home. Like my mom wants me to do chores, you know, and I need to study. But they like, go clean your room, wash those dishes. And, you know, I need to be in another environment so I can really, you know, really. So, you know, alhamdulillah, Sister Jalila, she made that move, and she had been in Senegal already. She made that move and sent Majida there, and she was able to finish, you know, being in the total environment, she was able to go ahead and knock it out.
Alhamdulillah. And I know, let's see, we have a question. I'm thinking about, Majida, beautiful example of continuing that legacy. And she has a conference going on right now for women and who are learning Quran, have memorized Quran and kind of cultivating that. So alhamdulillah, you just plant those seeds and you never know how far it's going to go and where it's going to end up and how many people it's going to impact. So alhamdulillah. Go ahead.
Another posted something. She said, talk about the environment. So the environment is like, when you're with us, you know, and at that time, our full-time school was at the Zawiya / Masjid, the Islamic Community Center over in the Greenbrier area. So, you know, you with us most of the day, total environment, you know, but then when you go home, there's all the other things going on. Your family might be watching TV. Now it's time to have dinner. Now you got chores to do, you know, and just regular stuff going on. And we're not going straight home. You know, we're going to this outing or we're going here, and like, I gotta go home and study. Like, I don't want to get beat. At the time, you know, since then we've eschewed corporal punishment and all of that for, you know, different type of motivation, just like in Medina now. But you know, we kind of stopped that early on here. But at that time, you know, there was the threat of, if I come and I don't know my lesson, you know, I can end up doing squats or get popped or this, that. It's like, look, I need to sit down somewhere and study, but you know, with your parents, I mean, what can you do? You know, so there's all this regular life going on, and the student is trying to immerse themselves and stay immersed, but they're getting pulled out of it at different
pressures.
Yeah,
the pressures of the dunya are just really strong, especially in this Western society.
The parents themselves, they're the one who, you know, running around, taking you to school, picking you up. So they showing you with their action that this is what they want. But then there's pulling on them that in turn affecting you. And it's like, I just want to be able to like focus. And it's hard here in America, especially when you're in a city like this. So that's the environment I was speaking of. Like, it's not like the parents are pulling them away or anything like that, but things that were pulling on them were in turn affecting the students and affecting their ability to focus. So she was the one who really first verbalized that she just flat out said to me, like one day she was kind of like, I saw she was kind of sad. And I was like, all right, what's going on? What's up with you? You know? And, you know, she might have like went a day or two not getting wrote a new lesson. And I was like, what's up with you? What's going on? And, you know, of course, we have family tie as well. Majida is my sister-in-law too, of course. So we had this, you know, intimate discussion where she just finally opened up and shared that. So I shared it with Aisha and got back to her mom, and you know that's how the conversation started, and that move for her to go ahead and go to Senegal.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, you're finding the real solutions that actually work that can make this like really a liable alternative, right? And I know Karima Hunter, your sister, is mentioning some of the other students at the school that have gone on to either study in Medina Bay or other Quran schools here. Majida, Habiba, Asma,
It
Ahmed.
was Adi, Amina Karima's son. And, you know, I was like, man, Hadi too. He got all the way to Ar-Rahman here in America. When his grandfather came, when Sheikh Muhammad Al-Amin, or Bab Al-Amin, as he's more affectionately called, yes, when he came to America, you know, he came to visit a couple of times because alhamdulillah, his, you know, Malik is here, his son married to Amina. So, you know, he would make it to Atlanta. Atlanta got a whole lot of blessings in that sense. So he would come to Atlanta sometime, and he came one day and, you know, it was like, you know, howdy, what's going on? What you doing here? You know, you studying? He's like, yeah, I'm studying Quran. And he asked him where he was, and when he told him Ar-Rahman, he was shocked. And he was even more shocked that Hadi knew his surahs, and wherever he threw him and asked him to recite, he could recite without no mistake. So he was like, you know, Amina, if you take this boy and send him, he can finish Quran. I don't know if he's gonna be able to do it here because, you know, it took Hadi several years to get there to Ar-Rahman, where in Senegal, you know, because it's the whole environment, you can move faster than that. But again, like Hadi was facing the same thing Majida was facing. You know, when you get home, you know, you got to do chores, you got to do this, you got to do that, you know. And our school at the time was dual track. We were doing regular secular academics as well as Quran because, you know, I recognize that we have to at least get them to a certain point so that if they do choose to do Quran full time, when they do that and come back, they'll be able to basically transition right into where they would be at their regular grade level and finish academics because you're an American child. You're gonna have to come back here and get in this system. You have to be very literate in your in this language, which is not your original language, but it's the language that you got, right? You're gonna have to be able to be literate in, you gotta be able to read well, and math, you have to be on point in math. So those are the areas that we really focused on in some say history and social studies, but in some science. But we really focus on language arts and math on the secular side, and we were doing Quran at the same time. So these guys were doing really excellent. They were in a dual track program and were really moving on both ends, all of them. So Sheikh Bab Amin, he was like, yo, I mean, you should send him. I mean, it was reluctant at the time, you know, that's her baby. Yeah, so she, you know, she was like, I don't want to send him because of X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. You know, if she hearing this, I know she's laughing. But alhamdulillah, I would be talking to her whenever, you know, she would come pick Hadi up after school, you know, we would talk about it. And somewhere in between there, she made the decision to send him. And alhamdulillah, he was successful and he finished Quran. Badia and Ani's son, Umar, the same. He got to Kulu here when he was here. And he was a real smart guy. I mean, you know, he would go a couple of days without studying. And if I pulled him, we'd be ready to beat him, be like, he would give cited surahs without no mistakes. And I'd just be like, you lucky, Allah love you. So, you know, they alhamdulillah, Dr. Khadija was I think the main push behind that one at that time, because I think both parents were like, no, I don't know if I want to send him to Senegal right now. You know, even my cousin Anis, he was a little reluctant too, you know, because I believe, no. At that time, Anis had been in Senegal before. So he had been, but, you know, he was a little reluctant, you know, to part with him.
Yes. And Imam Ihsan, you know, those are wonderful examples. And I'm just thinking about the fact that, yeah, there's this that reluctance on a lot of American parents because they're concerned about how they're going to catch up afterwards, right? And so I'm wondering what is that balance? Where is that point of learning Quran and the discipline that goes into that, and the strengthening of those intellectual skills? At what point do you feel like it outweighs what they might lose, what's perceived as what they might lose in the regular kind of Western educational system? So, you know, because you hear a lot of success stories, especially those who have completed the whole Quran, of how they're able to take that skill that they, you know, learning Quran and memorizing Quran in the course of, you know, 3 to 5 years, and then they can succeed in any endeavor or pursuit that they, you know, go after. So
You know,
when do you, yeah.
we used to see that in the immigrant communities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the early imams of the immigrant communities, they were also doctor so-and-so, you know, lawyer or attorney so-and-so, right? And then we would ask them, like, how did you memorize Quran? And they're like, oh, you know, I used to live in the, you know, in a big city, you know, and my parents, they sent me to go live with my grandparents in a small village, and they put me in Quran school, and that's how I memorized Quran school. And then after that, you know, I came and they, you know, back to the city, and then my parents put me in regular school, and it was nothing. It was easy. I blew through it because it was nothing for me to memorize. So I blew through medical school like that too. I would just, you know, just the same way I would memorize my surahs, I just memorized stuff like that. And that's why you saw so many of the professionals that were coming from their countries. They were also hafiz. Because of that early memorization training, they were able to go into any field that they wanted to, any field of study, and excel, you know, when they wanted to. You're a teacher. When it comes to like us being able to go in the Quran and then come back here and pick up where we left off, I did the same thing. So I knew that it could be done. And I knew that I wasn't the smartest or the sharpest stick. So I was like, if I can do it, you know, I know y'all can do it. When I left here, I was in the 8th grade, and I was in public school when I left, you know, because of, you know, different things going on in the community. But before going into public school, because of the education I received in the smaller Muslim community schools, all of us, when the Muslim community school had to fold and close, we all got skipped up grades. Some people got skipped up 2 grades. One of our sisters from Tallahassee, Sister Asma, she was so far ahead, she couldn't even really go back to high school. They just gave her a tutor, and they kind of like rounded her out, and she tested out of high school because it was like, why would you send y'all there? Y'all too far ahead. And one of the catalysts of that was Imam Abdul Karim, rahimahullah, the way that he used to teach math. Like, we were ahead of the curve of math. He would pick the furthest student in the school. And at the time, that was my big sister, Nia. I think she was in the 8th grade. And he would teach all of us 8th grade math and then push us even further than that. So we were into beginner's algebra when I was like in 3rd grade. So when the Muslim school folded, they were like, you can't go to the grade that you're supposed to be in. You can't even go to the next one. We're going to put you in the grade after that in middle school. So I was younger than I was supposed to be in middle school, and I was short and small. So that's a whole nother story. And they were like, you know, we're going to put you in all advanced classes. They wanted to put me all the way in the 7th grade. I was supposed to be going to the 5th grade, and I just refused. I fought against it, and I was like, that's too much. So they put me in 6th grade and in all advanced classes. All that just to say that when I left from 8th grade and went to Senegal, and I came back, I didn't even go back to high school. I just, you know, at the time, Sidi Kaba was in Atlanta, and he was studying to take his GED. And he let me hold all the books, the GED books. He would let me borrow them, and I would study them, and then I finally took my GED and just passed it. And from there, I went to like this the summer bridge program, and got matriculated in the college. So from that experience, I knew that we could easily send children if we had a certain type of program that was dual track, And at one point they would stop and go off and focus completely on Quran. They could come back and pick up where they left off. And I mentioned it, I know that you're a teacher. I know that you know that this curriculum that we have in the United States, K through 12, is more or less tied to the institutional part of education and not really what people can do. Because, and you know, and I talked to Professor, what was his last name, but Tawheed from FAMU, and a couple other people who were studying their doctorate at the time when I was putting together Nestle in Atlanta. And they agreed with me. They were like, yeah, you could definitely, you know, kind of compress down K through 12 to K through 8, you know, and that was my goal. I was gunning for K through 7, really, so that by 7th grade, when they finished that, they could transition over to doing Quran full time. And then when they finished Quran, just jump right back where they picked up, where they left off at, you know, take GED or do the, you know, test out of high school and get a diploma and then go on from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. And you see that model, even you see pieces of that model, even in like the homeschool curriculum, and they're able to teach at their own pace, you know, and I have a few students that come from, I have a student this year who's, I think, a 7th grader, but they've been in homeschool all their lives. And now they're this kind of mainstream private girls school. And she's so precious. She was a 7th grade. And we were talking as teachers, she had never been on a computer. So all of our other peers, you know, they're on devices and computers, and we were doing things, and she would just ask the most innocent questions. And like, but it's like, it's okay. You can still, but she would pick it up so quickly, you know? And I remember I was doing a math problem, and then I was depending on my textbook to like come up with another example, like a different example, but the same topic. And then I stalled for a moment because I was thinking, oh, maybe it's not so easy to do that. And she said, and she said it as I was thinking about it, like, you can just, Ms. Krim, you can just make another question up. It just showed her mentality was just very different. Like, you know, there's a way around all this, and you can learn at your own pace. And, but I was just thinking about even with Muhammad schools, for example, as you were talking about, that being able to take that skill of learning Quran and then going to such new heights. But, you know, coming from Muhammad schools, going there from pre-K to 12th grade and being in this bubble, right? Culturally, you know, even just the way that things were taught, such a small school. And I remember, you know, I graduated valedictorian of my 16 student class, but, you know, then I went to this very big institution, went to Duke University. And I remember there, and I knew from other students that had graduated from Muhammad schools that there were some gaps in certain disciplines, right? Specifically like science, especially, but in math and some of those other, just all the way around, there were gaps where maybe we weren't getting to the same level as some of the students in other public schools or private schools. But we knew, you know, that because of that, the culture and pride in ourselves and our culture and the love that we were receiving, like that, we knew that that is what took us so far, right? So what you're saying, like, and we were getting Quran, but we were just getting a little bit of it, you know, like barely getting through Juzama, right? So like, if you take like the whole Quran and the blessing and the barakah in that, then you can just see how far you can go, right? So absolutely, it's definitely possible. And so I think that we just have to figure out that formula, like how much of the Quran do you need, and how many years does it need to be just like only Quran that they're learning, right? Where that then they will be equipped to go on and be successful after that. So I think that's the part. And convincing, you know, the American mindset of success, right? That a lot of these parents that we have, because we want them to be successful, and we can't fully think about them. A lot of us can't fully think about them going to Africa to get the studies, or or fully just kind of letting go of the standard American education for even if it's just a couple of years. But yeah, so we have to find that special formula that we know that will lead them to success, even on both standards, an Islamic standard and the American standard. Yeah.
And we definitely have examples of that. I mean, you mentioned Majida. I mean, and there's many others. I mean, look at Asma and Habiba first. Asma followed her when Asma touched down. She saw Habiba had, you know, jumped right back in, you know, finished the high school stuff, jumped back into this, she's doing everything, you know. She saw that was, you know, that was something that she could do, you know. So she followed her sister on her sister's coattails and was able to do it. and then other people as well have come back and just got right back into the groove. And this was we used to have this a very lively debate, back in those days at Islamic Community Center in Greenbrier. Some parents were like, "Man, I don't even care about the the secular studies. And I'll just let my wife do that. I just want you to do from Quran full time." And it was like I couldn't cater to both, so I had to kind of settle on doing both. The having the secular academics available, and doing Quran at the same time. And even in our school in Greenbrier, they saw in the beginning, people were kind of like on the fence, or they were worried about X, Y, and Z. But the children that some children had to leave the school before when we were still up and running. They had to leave. It could have been they moved somewhere, and where they moved, it wasn't viable for them to be able to get to the school because of distance, and there were different circumstances that happened. But when those children had to go back to public school, same thing happened to us when we were younger. They weren't able to go to their grade that they were the age for, because they tested them and said, "Hey, you would just be wasting your time here. Let's go ahead and move you up to the next grade." So most of those people that came out, if they didn't go to if they didn't get skipped up a grade, well, I remember one student, I saw them after they had left the Quran school. I saw them somewhere, and I was like, "Oh, Assalamu alaikum, how you been?" And they're okay, and their attitude was kind of like meh. And I was like, I started asking about school, and they were like, eh. And I was like, explore, kind of like trying to get more out of them. And they're just like, "Well, school is okay, but it's like we're just doing the same stuff that we were doing at Nasr last year." You know what I mean? Like, so alhamdulillah, that concept of compressing, K through 12 down and teaching them ahead of their regular age / grade level, that worked for us. It worked in real time, and we saw it working. So we, it's one of the things that I would like to do here is, one, to set up like a type of program online where on the children's downtime in Senegal, like when they get their devices and stuff, instead of like, watching ratchet YouTube videos, they can log in and start to catch up or even go further just in their language arts and their math with some, there's so many different programs out there, and some of them are really geared to making learning not so much as a chore, but you know what I'm saying? So I want to, kind of get them doing some of that, so that when they do finish, and something that won't invade on their Quran time, something that they don't have to have no homework for, or something that they do like almost like in class work and in class learning, and they don't have to like think about that until next weekend when they get the devices again. Something that would like really brush them up, so that when they do finish Quran and come back here, they can have an easier transition back in the regular secular academics. Some people did have a little hard time, but that was only because those are the people who are, kind of not on their studies like they should have been before they left America. So when they came back, that kind of became evident. Like, oh, well, when you left, you weren't really at the level you should have been, like on your math, on knowing math, or your language arts were kind of like, suffering before you left. So of course, now when you come back, now you're gonna have to struggle. You didn't struggle before, so now you're gonna have to struggle. It's like it's gonna happen one way or the other. But yeah, so inshallah, that even as I'm saying that, you inshallah will get to the point where we can tap into each other as a resource to help Seda Kuba School, especially, to have that resource, and even develop something else that when they get back, they can tap into to be able to transition better.
Alhamdulillah. And Imam Ihsan, the reality is that there are enough of us on board that believe in the vision and believe that this works, that this formula works. And so at least we've kind of overcome that hurdle, that we know that this is valuable and that it is one of the keys to ultimate success, and just education in general that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. So I want to, I want to quickly say, definitely to your point, I'm here in Dallas, and it's my oldest nephew's here, of Jamila's children. His birthday is today. And the three of them, Jamila homeschooled the boys, all three of them, they never went to regular school, right? And outside of the house and maybe some homeschool co-ops. And then she moved to Medina Bay, and they, studied there just, for a year. And alhamdulillah, they came to Dallas, and Dallas, as Jamila just recently said, how it's kind of like a Medina Bay in the States, right? Because there's so many Muslims everywhere, and they have so many Quran schools. But that foundation that they got in Medina Bay, just that 1 year, was amazing and transformative. And they are, one of the boys was just mentioning to me how one of his teachers is like the biggest Qari, I don't know if just in Texas or like in the United States, right? And how they're so impressed with the level that they're at, like what they came to the school with, like, wow, like, this is amazing. So, and I was asking them the other day, like, about their Quran teachers, like, so who taught you guys Arabic and stuff before? And then Lut, the middle one, who's probably the most advanced in the Quran, he's like, my mom, or another sister at Sunday school in Atlanta at the masjid. So alhamdulillah, what they're getting in Medina Bay, it definitely just 1 year.
Yeah, teachers, they love to get somebody who has something under their belt. Like even me, when I left, I mentioned, my initial teachers in Tallahassee, but and when I came to Atlanta before I went to Senegal, I went a little further. At that time in our school at Oglethorpe Masjid, Brother Ahmed Abdullah, Bilal's father, he was a Quran teacher, and he got me all the way up to West Shamsi. So when I came to Senegal, and when I had that sitting I mentioned earlier with my teacher and Hafiz Ahmed, Sister Cream, my father, the teacher, he got a chance to ask some questions about us. And he was like, have you ever studied, Quran, the alphabet, and I was like, yeah, I know alphabet, I can read, da, da, da. So he was like, you could see it, like, he was like, like, because the worst thing for a Quran teacher, and I think everybody would agree with me, is having to start somebody off from Alif by Ta, just be like, because it can be a struggle, and a different type of struggle depending on the child. Like with American kids, is actually easier because they start off with a written language, right? That makes a big difference. Senegal, they lost the written form of their language a long time ago. The only way that they communicate in writing is with Romantic letters or with Arabic letters, right? And they can write that, they can communicate in all of using either the Romantic system or the Arabic system, but they lost the writing of their own language long time ago. So when the Senegalese children to start Quran from Alif Ba, it's like a chore, because you're not only having to teach the person the letters and the alphabets, you have to teach them the concept that there is a visual representation of this language that you speak, right? So it's the concept. You can get somebody to memorize something easy, but to get them to understand a concept, it can be easy or it can be hard. You can't quantify it. It's just hard. Conceptual stuff is much harder than rote memorization. I mean, you know this better than me. So when the teacher asked me about reading, I could see him getting happy, like, getting excited, like, He's like, okay, what surahs you know? And I just ran down, like, I know this. And he asked me to recite something. And even he was shocked, to the point where he asked me, who's your teacher? And I was like, Brother Ahmed. And when Ahmed translated, he was like, huh? Ahmed, what's his last name? And I was like, Abdullah. My teacher was expecting me to say Juf or Cham or Cisse or some name that he would recognize, because they did that good of a job teaching us. But I was like, in my mind, I was like, no, it's just, African-American bro somewhere, in Atlanta. Is nobody that I don't think you would know. But they get happy to see somebody come with something. I'm sure when he came back from Senegal, because just in that year, Dr. Jamil's son did excellent. Like if Shaykh Hassan was there, he would have fought. He would have fought to have him stay. Him like, leave him. You know what I'm saying? This dude, he's on track to be able to finish here. You know, Shaykh Hassan would have been like, nah, leave him. Please leave him. But I know that his teacher, when he hit Texas, his teacher was like, okay, I'll put you over here. You know what I mean? Because you already got a good foundation. It's gonna be easy for me to like polish you up and get you, to the finish line. So I already know that they were happy to see that and excited.
Imam Ihsan, we could go on and on. I know we've gone over our 2-hour mark.
I didn't even know.
I want to ask you, we've been talking a lot about the future generation or the generation coming up now and ourselves, but we think about our parents that made so many sacrifices, right? And it was their vision that we are carrying out now. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. And so I'm wondering, but there's still a lot of our age and our parents' age that are trying to learn Quran or just learn more about the religion, right? In its proper sense. And some of them are in retirement planning to go and move to Medina Bay or Muslim country and learn, right? And so what is your advice to those who have been, as long as we've been alive, they've been wanting to learn Quran and be proficient in it, but because they just didn't have the foundation, the opportunities that we had, it seems almost at times like it may not happen. So what's your advice to them to keep them motivated and focus on the goal?
As we say in America, it's never over until the fat lady sings. Right? We have that saying. And we have some hardcore example, especially from Medina Bay. It's never over. You're never to the point where you should say, oh, I can't learn, I can't do that. She asked me to say that. No, don't say because you're too old or because you from America. You can do it. You can do it. And he would say, you deserve everything. Whatever you work for, you deserve everything. Allah can give it to you. And him in particular, the way that he would address the students, he would address that problem of like the older students coming over. I mean, these are guys who are already 18, 19, 20, you know what I'm saying? Like I mentioned a couple of people, Sidi Kaba, he might kind of fall in that group. So when they got there, they were kind of already older. They, and it was kind of hard for them to be, in the school with, a bunch of young kids, little kids. It was kind of hard to focus. So it's something that they had to adjust to. And some of the other older people who came like after Sidi Kaba, they would flat out tell Sheikh, like, I can't do it. I can't, I feel like I'm in a nursery school, trying to study with a bunch of little kids. And I don't know if it might have been a morale thing because these kids are past me, and I'm trying to like learn from scratch. So Shaykh Hassan, one of the major things he did was he created an entire classroom for the older students, and he hired a teacher named Malam Ali. And Malam Ali, he brought him from Nigeria. He wasn't from the area where, most of the brothers and sisters that I know from Nigeria were from like the Kano area. He was from like Sokoto area. And, it's known, they're kind of known for being a little more austere. So Malam Ali, he was like the perfect person. Like it was like, Shaykh Hassan couldn't pick nobody better than him. So he picked him, he hired him and brought him to Medina. And he was teaching Quran and fiqh classes with us. And his story, his backdrop was this. And we found out, we were in his class one day and somebody was like, I feel like I'm too old. He said, too old? What is this? He said, me? He said, I was 24 years old. I was married and I had children. I finished university and I was living with my family. And then one day it hit me. Like, I'm like, something happened to him. And if he told us exactly what that event was, I forgot it. I didn't record it in my mind. But said something happened and he was struck with a sense of loss or of longing that he missed out on memorizing the Quran. And it hit him so hard, he said, I dismantled my household. I sent my wife with my children to go back with my in-laws, with her parents to live. And I put myself in Quran school. And anybody know him, know the type of focus he had. He finished the Quran in like 3 years. So all the older students, they immediately crestfallen. I mean, you can see literally the face just fall on the ground, because that was Shaykh Hassan's way of doing away with any type of excuse. This is a grown man. He said, I went back to Quran school as a grown man. And then one of his top students was Malam Sadiq. Malam Sadiq was in his 40s. And he did the same thing that Malam Ali did and came, and Shaykh Hassan put him in Malam Ali class. So here you have a teacher and a student, same kind of background. After that, like, nobody really had no excuse after that. And then, of course, we had the example in our grandmother, Ya Fatu, rahimahullah. We know that, and I'm paraphrasing greatly, and I might be leaving something out. So, bear with me and forgive me if I mess up on that history. But, she was in Quran school, and, she encountered some difficulties with focus and studying because she was getting older. She was getting older and still trying to finish. And I'm sure at that time there were, responsibilities of being who she was. Sheikh Ibrahim's oldest daughter, and all the activities going around that she wasn't able to finish, the regular way in Quran school. So, Sheikh Ibrahim, he took her out of school and had her married to Sidi Ali Cisse, radiallahu ta'ala. But she never stopped. And from what I remember being told is that she would continue to read a juz every day. If not a hizb, it was two hizb, a juz every day. And she would just keep reading. With all the responsibilities and the work that came with being, the imam's wife and running this huge household. You see Kirpa, it's always been big. It just now is just like massive. But she's always been, having the responsibility of running the imam's house. And at the time, the Ghanaian students were like us, the American students. They were the ones who came to Medina from somewhere far away, left their homes to come to study Quran and to study under the Sheikh. So, she had to take care of those students. Much like, Sister Creamy used to take care of us. Fajr used to take care of us as well to a certain extent, especially after Sister Creamy left. But at that time, she was doing it 100% with the Ghanaian students. So she had these other people's children to take care of. She had everybody in her household. She was running the household and all of this, but she still maintained that recitation and reading that juz every day, till it got to the point where she had memorized the entire Quran. After not being able to do it in school, but she did it over the, doing her own responsibility and still doing everything else, she was able to memorize the whole thing. And mashallah, Allah, I don't even know how to explain it. I had this, Allah just blessed me to have like a relationship with Yafat, rahimahullah. And I used to call her a lot when I came back to America. I don't even remember like what I would used to say to her. I just used to call her and greet her. And she used to always ask me about my surahs, like, how the surahs doing? You on top of it? You reading? You reciting every day? And I remember at one time, as my calls kind of got less and less, I talked to her, and I was kind of falling off a little bit. I hadn't like studied for a week. I think I like traveled somewhere, and I came back and just threw my whole routine off. So I felt like I was kind of like falling off. And I talked to her, and my first knee-jerk reaction would be like, yeah, everything's good. I'm on top of it. I'm on it. What you heard? Like, you hear something different? Like, but I just, before I can even like tell a lie, I just blurted out like, well, I haven't been studying, because the ijazah that I received from Shaykh Hassan and reciting was to finish it every 7 days. And it just got really heavy on me. And I was trying to like, study the GED, and I'm moving around doing different stuff. Fajr, she gave me ijaza to finish in 30 days and recite, just the two hizb a day. So that was an out for me. I was really happy about that. And so we had we had her real example, being somebody who older, who continued on and finished in the midst of all her responsibilities. And we have Shaykh Hassan, bringing Malam Ali in there and showing us like, hey, here's people who are successful with it, and they did this. They're older than you. They have more responsibility than you. So we were completely disabused of that notion of you can get to be too old and can't finish Quran. That just wasn't a notion. And Shaykh Hassan used to say, there is no study. He reminded us, there is no you get to the point where you don't study. Prophet Sallallahu said the studying for the Muslim, or the period of learning, is from the cradle to the grave. And that's leached this way into our cultural, zeitgeist. They don't, of course, quote it from the Prophet Sallallahu, but learning is from the cradle to the grave. Shaykh Hassan be like, me, I'm always studying. I'm still learning. Even the Mauritanian people one day, they came and they were shocked seeing the Shaykh Hassan sitting down and teaching us Al-Akhdari. That was when I was still in Quran school, so I couldn't really join the class. On the weekend, I would sit with them. Like when I was out of Quran school, I would sit with them and I would take my notes and stuff. And I remember like a couple of the big Mauritanian guests that came, and they were like looking over Shaykh Hassan's shoulder, looking at us. The whole time they were just in shock, like looking around like, what is really happening? And after the class, they were like, Sheikh, how can you be sitting down with little kids teaching them when your position, it requires much more of you, right? At this time in your life. And he was like, hi, this is good for me. First, it's good for them because I speak their language. It's different from them sitting with a teacher, have to speak to them. They might not catch all the concepts. I speak their language better, right? Better than us even. and it's a refresher for me. That's what he said to them. And they were just like, mashallah. So we always got that from Medina, like, hey, even though, we push the kids to study and that there's never a time where you can't jump back on this horse and memorize the Quran if you want to learn everything that you have as an intention in your heart, or you have a goal to learn. There's never a time when you can't do that, no matter how old you are.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for that.
I would add to that we know some years, like a little while before COVID, some of the older adults, they prevailed upon me to put together a class for them. So I said, I told them, I was like, I was opposed to having them come sit down in the class with the school with the kids, because it's kind of a distraction. When a couple of them did that, so I was like, okay, if you all are serious, we'll put together an adult program. And this is when the school had transitioned over to just being a weekend school, and we were at Muminun, Masjid Muminun and Imam Furqan were hosting, we're hosting the school there and allowing us to do it there. So when we put together the Quran, I put together a whole syllabus for the adults. That was something that Shaykh Hassan used to say. He'd be like, you have to treat people the way that they used to being treated. If they're in America and they used to, this and this and that, you have to be on their level with them, or this and that. So I said, these people, they are professionals in their fields. They know what a syllabus is. So I arranged the class with that. I had a whole timeline, of what we're going to cover, the dates we're going to be off for vacation, all of that, put it together for them. So they're like, okay, we can do this. And my first 2 days of class were just orientation and intro. And one of the things that I told them, I was like, listen, what I want to point out to you is this, because, I assessed them publicly. Like I assessed everybody in front of the class so everybody could see where everybody was at. Everybody who stuck with the class, they were grandparent age. They were all older than me. So, like the second introduction in class, I said, listen, it's not that you don't know how to read Arabic or you haven't memorized more Quran for, lack of effort or dearth of effort, because you all have been Muslim more than I've been alive. And what you all been telling me is that, you know, you've been telling me so many stories of like, you know, classes that started up and, you know, petered out. Classes here started petered out. You know, you've put so much effort, even if it's only been on the weekends to studying. It's not been lack of effort on your part. It's been lack of the proper approach, right? And I got this from one of my teachers here, American brother named Khalifa Abdul Wali, Ustaz Khalifa, from New Jersey. He's, you know, traveled and studied, and basically he summarized his educational approach. And I put my own term to it, which is transitional learning. And he was like, it's not that, he said, the reason why they haven't learned and hasn't stuck with them is because most of the teachers coming to teach have been from, you know, other countries. And they teach the method that they would teach a small child. But what a small child has in their language, we don't have. A child of 4-year-old has over a vocabulary of 5,000 words. You could lead them through a house and they'll name everything in the house. What is this? A refrigerator. What is this? A chair. What is this? A spoon. They can name everything. We don't have even that vocabulary foundation. So you can't teach us like that because we don't have that foundation to draw on. You have to teach us where you take what we have in our language, and we have a leg up because it's a written language already with rules. You know, with language, you know, language art has own structure in English, similar to Arabic. Arabic is a little more advanced, but, you know, so a person who has, you know, finished high school, they have a language where they can any philosophical concept, they can transmit it to you in writing, right? That means their level of language is at a high level. You have to be able to teach them where you transition that learning in English over to Arabic, not start them from the ground coming up. If you do it that way, they're gonna pick up and it's gonna stick. So I was telling them like, this is the method we're gonna use is gonna be transitional learning. And like that 2 days to just show them, you know all of this already. You know all these rules already. All we're gonna do is link them over to Arabic. And the few people that stuck, only 3 people. We started out with like 8 people, only 3 stuck out to the end of the class. But all of them, they were like, I really feel like I'm grounded in reading now. I can read. I go home and I read on my own. I read past the lesson you gave us to memorize. And I'm doing it, you know, with no problem. So a lot of it has to do with the educational approach. You have to approach somebody who has a written language already under their belt different than a child who has vocabulary but no knowledge of language arts in a specific language. So approach has something to do with it. But age, the only thing age has to do is if you're in this country, it's going to be hard because you've grown and you got grown people responsibilities. And that's why they tell you, you got to do what you want to do when you're young, because when you get older, regular life is going to invade against you for doing those things that you want to do, studying and learning. You're going to have to actually make a physical, spiritual, mental effort to remove yourself and take yourself to a different environment. It can be done in America, but it's just going to be really hard. If you jump up and you take yourself somewhere else, like where the environment is conducive to that, like a Senegal, you know, it'll be easy for you to be successful. It will, but you can do it here. No, I'm not saying that it can't be done here. For the children or the adults, it can be done. It's just going to take a lot more effort and discipline than a lot of people have, including myself. I don't think I would be able to do it.
Yes, and then feeling comfortable in those environments that they're learning in as well, right? Alhamdulillah, and I think that, you know, Ruhul Adab is trying to do a good job with having the different classes and even Quran classes and with teachers that you feel comfortable with, right? I was just on the Zoom with Usada Sakina, who's working with the sisters. It's all just sisters. It wasn't intended just for sisters, but I know that they have to feel comfortable. So alhamdulillah. So I want to, at some other point, we have to have a discussion about, you know, your role now as Imam and teaching about tasawwuf and the tariqa and how that, you know, engages with, you know, successful memorization of Quran or going deeper into Quranic studies and, you know, having the I guess the adab and the lessons and the teachings of the tariqa as well. But for now, as you know, we've gone over our 2.5 hour mark. So I want to see if before we close up, inshallah, if there are any questions from the participants before Brother Ihsan closes out. Are there any questions? I know that some of your questions you posted while we were speaking.
Oh, let me look back there. Let me see. I didn't see any new questions. I think the last question was from Dr. Jamil.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I don't see anything else.
Assalamu alaikum, Auntie Amira. Nice that you're here with us. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Yes. But thank you. It was such a great interview, and I learned so much about you and your family. And like I said, you know, your father, was his name Abdul Rahman, or what was Sheikh's name?
Rahim.
Abdul Rahim, yes.
Yeah. And I remember your mother was one of the people who used to always call him Sheikh, and I'd be like, why she calling him Sheikh? Like, Sister Martha would come to the shop. She'd be like, hey, Sheikh, and I'd be like, you know, I just be like, he's not a Sheikh, why y'all calling him a Sheikh? But
I don't think my mother came up with that. I think your father told her that was his name, or someone else. I'm not sure. But it's such a beautiful story. It's just amazing how our, you know, lives, you know, collide, and how it's like this 360. Because I remember, you know, my mother, of course, came to the nation, and then she was really good friends with Sister Winifred, who then became Sister Farida, who then was one of the wives of your father. And, you know, my mother, especially when she was a single mom for a while, and she didn't have transportation, she didn't have a car until, oh my, she was in her 30s, and we got used to, as children, public transportation. So when she finally got a car, she was on a mission that she was going to alleviate this, you know, that part of the lives of other single mothers who didn't have transportation. So we were like always taking other moms with their kids home. We like always had a full car. And so Sister Winifred was one of those people, and Sister Farida. And I just remember watching as a young child, like the struggles that they went through as single moms. And they each had 4 kids and trying to raise these boys and And I remember, anyway, I just remember there being a lot of tension and a lot of struggle. And I remember when she married your father, it was just like, her life just transformed. There was so much peace, and she seemed so calm, and alhamdulillah. So it was like, so I remember that. And I just knew, like I said, I knew that your father had something to do with this movement, you know, this Sufi tasawwuf type of thing. And just like the idea of Sheikh, like for me, Sheikh was only for people that were in the Tariqa. Like, you know, I didn't have that vocabulary. I didn't call people that before. It was just Imam. So, so alhamdulillah, yeah. And he was just so cool, right?
Yeah. Everybody would just come through and sit down and talk with him. And, you know, most of the time he would just be quiet, just nodding and listening most of the time. But yeah, I remember your mom. Your mom used to stop by the shop all the time, and she was floating the idea of sending you guys. I don't know if you ever heard that. Oh yeah, she used to ask me a lot of questions in Senegal. Yeah, she was definitely, it was something she wanted to do. Yeah, I remember she's a visit a lot. Rahimahullah.
Alhamdulillah. And now her children and grandchildren are experiencing that. So alhamdulillah.
And I'll end with this. Shaykh Hassan used to tell us a story, not of Shaykh Ibrahim himself, but it was, and again, I might mess up on some of the details, so I'm paraphrasing greatly here, but one of his grandfathers, you know, they were in Quran school with his brothers, and the grandfather didn't finish Quran. You know, maybe only got like, you know, so far, maybe just a few hizbs in. And his brothers, you know, they finished Quran. He said that grandfather said, I'm gonna get my payback in my children. I'm gonna catch up to y'all, my children. And he said, Shaykh Ibrahim, he was sitting down and teaching, and the children of those, you know, uncles or grandfathers, they were in his majalis or his learning circle, learning under him. And he's like, yeah, what my grandfather said is true. He was going to get it payback in his children. So whatever you can do for yourself, make sure that you do it for your children. Put them in the, my father, people who remember him, like he's always trying to like memorize Quran. Even sometimes I would see him like he would just come to the shop that day and be like, I'm gonna learn a certain surah. So people come and would visit, he would just kind of like, he would stick his magnifying glass in the Quran and close it and go back to go to the front and talk to people. But he would, it was like a constant interruption the time that he did want to study. So he did everything he could to put me in the position where I could do what he couldn't do. And Shaykh Hassan tell the same thing, like whatever you can do for yourself, make sure you do it for your children. Put them in give them the opportunity that you didn't have, and then ask Allah to bless them and give them, and then allow to do it.
Ameen. Yes, so thank you for that. You have so many pearls of wisdom to share. So if we have to like literally stop it so that you don't keep blessing us with pearls of wisdom. so again, I want to see if there are any more questions. Final call, and if not, Imam Ihsan, if you could close us in dua, inshallah.
Inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراط المستقيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Ameen. Alhamdulillah. And pray that you have a blessed week, and may Allah continue to shower you with his wisdom and mercy and love, inshallah. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Ruhul Adab, for hosting this event. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.